subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. Hello to all lovers of lemon scenes. I invite you all to my boosty so you can watch your favorite Naruto What If stories in complete comfort. A subscription to Naruto Lemon costs $1.04. The first video with a full lemon is already on my boosty channel. Dare! The crowned family was in a dark stone cave, at the entrance of which a couple of the best Anbu Konoha were on duty. Still, the birth of Jinchuriki is an extremely dangerous business. Minato was standing over an exhausted Kushina, who was clutching two tiny bundles to herself. "Honey, are you okay?" The blonde asked worriedly, putting his palm on Kunoichi's neck, checking his pulse with his finger. "Yes." Kushina smiled slightly and opened her eyes a little. Shinobi knelt down and timidly kissed the exhausted Jinchuriki. The man decided to take his children in his arms. Hokage couldn't believe his luck, he finally became a father. "Let's call the boy Naruto, we decided that a long time ago, but what about the girl?" Uzumaki asked quietly. "Maybe Aiko?" Minato suggested, gently rocking the children in his arms. "Favorite child? It suits her, she's such a sweetheart." Suddenly, quiet footsteps were heard from the dark tunnel. The walking man clearly did not hide his presence. Hokage immediately handed the parcels to his wife and looked warily in that direction. "Wolf, I asked you not to disturb us." But the guest wasn't Anbu at all. The short figure, dressed in a black cloak and an acid-orange mask with a single hole, radiated an almost tangible threat. "Give me the Jinchuriki, Minato, and your children will not suffer." Hokage without further ado moved behind the opponent's back with the help of his trademark Thunder God flight technique and pierced the body with a Rasengan through and through. However, the enemy did not seem to notice his attempts and simply jumped to Kushina's bed, putting kunai to one of the tiny bundles. Stunned by such devilry, the blonde froze. He could not risk his daughter's life. The stranger put his other hand on Jinchuriki's stomach. The woman didn't even have time to move when the seal restraining Kyubi ceased to exist. Kushina screamed in pain, and the intruder just disappeared. Minato rushed to his wife, trying to restore the seal, but he was a complete layman in Fuinjutsu, which is why a portion of the chakra pumped into the spreading ink pattern only accelerated the release of the nine-tailed. Realizing that a catastrophe was inevitable, the Hokage grabbed his wife and moved with her to the kunai, which was buried in advance a few miles from the village. "I'm sorry, my love." The blonde kissed Kushina's face, distorted by a grimace of pain, shining with salty drops, and stabbed her in the eye with a sharpened dagger. This was the only way to prevent the release of Bijou. Hokage's hand was intercepted by a black glove. Stunned Minato looked up and saw an orange mask in front of him. The man made a cut, but the opponent easily dodged and kicked him in the head. "Idiot, Kyubi is about to break free and devour us all." The blonde man was transported to his wife several times, trying to finish her off, but each time he was stopped by a stranger who appeared out of nowhere. "That's all I need," the enemy replied softly, shaking his palm in front of him, urging Minato to attack first. Hokage cursed, ran back 100 meters, quickly folded a chain of seals and raised his hands to the sky. From a fat thundercloud, successfully passing over Konoha, a branching, dazzling lightning burst out. The flow of energy hit the place where Kushina was lying, but she was no longer there. Minato realized with horror that he, like a complete idiot, let go of the opponent with Jinchuriki in his arms while running 100 meters. Cursing, the wayward Hokage was transported to the cave where two abandoned babies were filled with a truly deafening roar. Without further ado, the father grabbed the children and was transported to his mansion. There was a real commotion in the house. The maid, the cook and the butler were running around the living room and screaming all sorts of nonsense. "Shut up!" Minato barked, causing people to almost faint. "I order you to protect the children at the cost of your life." The blonde handed the packages to the barely breathing cook and was transported to the place where he had last seen his wife. The Hokage ran in a spiral, trying to somehow detect such a trifle as the Jinchuriki melting from the demonic chakra. It didn't take long to look. A few miles away, at the foot of a low mountain range, a huge scarlet cloud was blowing up. The blonde man shouted a good obscenity and rushed there with short spatial jumps. A giant fox silhouette formed from the cloud, rising on its hind legs and roaring like a herd of angry hippos. The fox dropped to 4 paws and looked at the dark figure in a red mask standing calmly in front of him, covering with his body a panting scarlet-haired woman, from whose mouth a thin trickle of blood was flowing. "You let me out, little man, and for that I will reward you." The man chuckled in surprise. He realized by the voice that Bijou was a female. The fox lifted the man in the palm of her hand, then grinned maliciously and was about to devour him with giblets, but it was not there. Kitsune could not move. From a dark hole in the mask, a Mangek Sharingan sparkled with a scarlet light. "I know your thanks. Go and destroy Konoha, that's an order." The stranger barked in an imperious voice and jumped to the ground. The fox, as if spellbound, turned its tailed seat towards him and wandered towards the village. The man looked around for Jinchuriki's body, but it was nowhere to be found. But an enraged Hokage appeared right in front of his nose, bringing down a flurry of blows on the impudent man. "Idiot!" the stranger muttered and disappeared into a dark funnel, disappearing from the life of the village for a long time, leaving behind a shaggy 1,000-ton gift. Minato roared like a wounded bear and rushed after the tailed creature now, really feeling like a real idiot. Another chain of seals, another thunderclap and a powerful electric discharge hits Bijou in the head. A deafening roar rang out over Konoha, the fox's paws jerked convulsively, and Bijou sat down on the ground, crushing a couple of dozen trees and shaking her head dazedly. Minato was breathing heavily. He had already spent half of his chakra. Another couple of such blows, and he would be useless, and this creature would at least have a henna. Kubi was very offended by such disrespectful treatment and, growling angrily, began to load the Bijou bomb, preparing to send it to the center of the village. To say that the Hokage was scared is to say nothing. He was on the verge of panic. Minato moved to the nose of the demoness and hit her with a Rasengan in the eye, but the fox managed to lower her eyelid and the powerful attacking technique only cut off the red fur in a neat circle, ignominiously disintegrating on the stone-hard skin. Then the Hokage decided to smash the bomb that had not yet formed, but Bijou waved him off like an annoying mosquito. Kyubi swallowed the black ball, but then a powerful geyser hit her belly, throwing Bijou a good 100 meters away. A plasma beam struck from her mouth, hitting a mountain ridge, but without causing any harm to Konoha, from which the gong was ringing. Minato breathed a sigh of relief as he climbed out of the pile of shattered wood where Bijou had thrown him. Help arrived. Dozens, hundreds of shinobi, under the leadership of the Old Man III, brought down on the damned creature a real flurry of their most powerful techniques and, it would seem, all living things should have perished in this branch of hell on earth. But Kyubi is an exception from all conceivable and unthinkable rules. The roaring Bijou rose to its paws and exhaled a long tongue of withering flame, dispersing tiny people like insects with a repellent. Now, without any orders, she wanted to burn down this village to the ground. Nine-tailed inexorably, like a mountain collapse, moved towards the city wall, burning dozens of gawking jonins with an incredibly powerful and hot flame along the way. Kitsune stepped on a stone barrier, more than 10 meters thick and more than 40 meters high. The protective structure crunched pitifully and crumbled into a pile of rubble under the mighty paws. Minato furiously beat the ugly bastard with lightning bolts. Hiruzen poured water on her, trying to enhance the effect of electric shocks. Bijou was howling pitifully in pain, dark circles swam before her eyes. In the places of lightning strikes, the skin was charred and the skin, along with the meat, peeled off from the bones. The nerves were burned to the ground, because the hind legs, like the tails, stopped obeying her. Kyubi understood that they wouldn't let her go just like that now, and she had only one chance to survive, to kill all her enemies. Kitsune started charging the bomb again. The exhausted shinobi could no longer stop her. Suddenly, from the side of the Hokage mansion, who was lucky enough to escape the fox's paws, golden spiked chains flew out, wrapping around Bijuu's entire body. Kyubi dropped the unfinished bomb from surprise, which crashed on the pavement, scattering huge blue-black fragments that riddled the nearest houses. No! No! A deafening roar shook the entire village. Kyubi was already dreaming of death now, not wanting to be locked up forever. Minato realized that apart from Kushina, no one was able to hold the nine-tailed one, so he rushed to the place from which the chain stretched. Jinchuriki looked just awful, she was literally choking on her blood. "Mina that." Kushina, shaking with a large tremor, babbled through the syllables, forcing a smile at her husband. "Darling, how can I help you? Just tell me, I'll do everything." The Hokage, exhausted from overwork, rushed to his wife and froze waiting for instructions. "Bring it, children's. I'll seal the kubi." "What? But these are our children, we cannot condemn them to drag out this heavy burden. They are Uzumaki, no one else can contain this monster." Minato froze for a few seconds, gathering his courage. He understood that his children would curse their parents for this act all their lives, but they simply had no choice. They could not put the family above the village. "Good." Namikaze whispered faintly and disappeared into thin air with a pop. After a few seconds, he reappeared in front of Kushina, with two squeaking bundles in his hands. "Naruto, Aiko, forgive us," Uzumaki whispered softly and began to fold the seals, not letting the chains out of her hands. Minato put one hand on Kushina's stomach, passing her the crumbs of chakra that he still had. All this time, the Kyubi, rushing to freedom, screamed deafeningly, and there was so much pain, so much hatred in her last furious scream that the seasoned jonins fell to their knees and clasped their heads with their hands, barely restraining the horror filling their souls. Kushina drew spirals on the bellies of babies, but they were different. Fuinjutsu master, she understood that Bijuu would break any seal sooner or later, and even she herself could not hold it, because Kubi's consciousness was separated from her chakra. The fox turned back into a scarlet cloud of chakra. A dark red, almost black haze was drawn into a spiral on the boy's stomach, and a light orange, almost copper, went to the girl. Naruto's cheeks had the same stripes as his mother's, while Aiko was deprived of this dubious decoration. Minato carried his exhausted wife and terrified children into the house and handed them to the servants. The Hokage himself moved to his residence. Very soon, he will have to answer for the damage caused to Konoha. Minato was literally dragged along by the advice of the elders. The villagers were furious. After all, it was his damned wife who let the monster out for a walk. About 1,000 people were killed and more than 1,500 were injured. The material damage caused to the village was measured in billions of Danzo. Sensing his chance to seize power, began to pull out the dirty underwear of the crowned family for everyone to see. The old schemer, with the help of specially hired drunks and hucksters, spread the information that Kyubi did not die, but lives in one of Minato's children. It was possible to calculate the Jinchuriki by 6 black stripes on the cheeks. The head of the root could not even imagine that both the son and the daughter of the Hokage were Jinchuriki, but the girl was much more lucky, she had no external signs. And yet, despite all the efforts of the power-hungry grandfather, his activities and his very existence were always accompanied by excessive secrecy, because people did not want to see a stranger at the post of Hokage. After grumbling and worrying, people forgave Minato. Still, it wasn't his fault, except that Jinchuriki could be taken away from the village, but who knew that the best security, a top-secret shelter and a Hokage sticking out at arm's length would not be enough to ensure security? All responsibility for the destruction caused lay on the shoulders of the stranger in the orange mask, but it could be anyone, and he, of course, was beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. But Kyubi, hiding in a helpless boy, was within walking distance, and every year more and more infuriated people. 6 years have passed, the children have grown up. Both Naruto and Aiko were wonderful kids, obedient and diligent. They diligently carried out all the instructions of their parents, but the girl did everything better, for which she earned more parental love. However, she really showed herself when Minato began teaching children the art of shinobi. Both babies showed a pronounced fire chakra. The simplest jutsu of this element, a fireball, turned out for Aiko from the first time. Yes, how did it happen? A powerful explosion demolished a concrete slab installed at the landfill as a target. Hokage gasped in amazement, and even began to applaud. "My daughter, you're great, you're just great." The girl shone like a little sun, and smiled her invariable wide smile. For the first time in his life, Naruto was overcome with envy. Despite his best efforts, the fireball never came out on the first day. But the little sister almost brought her father to a piggy squeal, undermining the juicy lawn with clumps of flame. Minato noticed his son's frustration and indulgently ruffled his golden hedgehog hair. "Nothing, son, it will work out later," but neither tomorrow, nor the day after tomorrow, nor even a week later, the boy did not succeed, which is why his father's attention finally switched to Aiko. However, for the Hokage family, the battle with the Ninetales did not pass without a trace. Kushina withered like a plucked flower. Demonic energy, which burst into the hearth of the woman's chakra in huge quantities, practically incinerated her SCC, forever depriving the bloody habanero of the opportunity to use jutsu. At first, the last of the Uzumaki clan tried to overcome the disease and trained hard, but this only worsened the situation, causing her constant abdominal pain. Minato made every effort, sent Kushina to the best doctors of the shinobi world, but everything was to no avail. In the 6th year, doctors made a disappointing diagnosis: cancer of the small intestine. Kushina and Minato froze in place, not believing that what was happening was real. The bloody habanero sobbed and burst into bitter tears, hanging on her husband's neck. Would she never see her children grow up? Is she not destined to babysit her grandchildren? Minato was no better, he just couldn't imagine life without her. Everything that was happening seemed to him a bad dream, a prolonged nightmare, from which he could not get rid of. On the same day, the former Jinchuriki was admitted to the hospital, under the tireless supervision of Irianinov. "Kushina, you will get better, you will definitely get better," Minato murmured in a slightly trembling voice, squeezing his wife's palm in his hand. He loved her more than life, and simply could not believe that she was doomed to a slow and painful death. "Of course I'll get better, you idiot." Kunoichi barked much more confidently and pulled her husband to her with one jerk. "Promise me you'll take care of our children while I'm gone." "Of course, dear." "Aiko, I know everything about Aiko. Pay more attention to Naruto, it seems to me that something is wrong with him. Of course, this dolt is not trying at all, he taught the fireball for a whole week, so what? He's still our son. Of course, but he needs to be made to understand that he needs to make a little effort to earn the attention of his parents. Don't overdo it," Kushina whispered softly and dozed off. The doctor who entered noticed this and escorted the persistent hubby home. "We'll take care of her, Minato-sama, don't worry." Hokage went home, cats were scratching at his soul. Minato was greeted by his children, a joyful Aiko and a sullen, focused Naruto, immersed in his thoughts. "Dad, hi. How are you?" the girl asked cheerfully. Hokage smiled at the sight of his daughter, all the heavy thoughts immediately disappeared from his head. Where's Mom? Naruto asked quietly, who didn't even want to see his father. He gave all his attention, all his care to this damned Aiko. Only the mother loved them equally and did not forget about the existence of her son at the sight of her daughter. Minato immediately frowned and sternly looked at his son, who disappoints him almost every day. She left Konoha. Not for long, but in the near future she will not be. Hokage did not want to tell his children that their mother was seriously ill, but Naruto had noticed it for a long time and only said quietly, "I see." The dejected boy, gloomier than a cloud, slowly walked to his room, head downcast. Jinchuriki slammed the door loudly and bolted it, shutting off such a cold and indifferent family. Aiko followed him with a puzzled look, but her father immediately shielded the retreating disappointment with his back, smiling warmly at his only ray of hope, from which he was going to kindle a real unquenchable flame. "Do you want to practice together?" "Of course, Daddy." Aiko threw herself on her father's neck. To realize that you are the pride of your own parents was pleasant in itself, which is to say about the pleasure of conquering a wide variety of techniques that are usually studied by much older people. Besides, the opportunity to be away from his eternally angry and dissatisfied brother was not superfluous. Hokage smiled happily and, putting his daughter on his shoulders, carried her to the vast backyard of his estate. Minato was not a stupid person and had long planned the education and career of his beloved daughter. Even now, she was not inferior to the average Chunin in strength. With proper preparation, by the age of admission to the academy, she will be no weaker than Jonin. The doctors said that somehow, in an incomprehensible way, the girl was able not only to keep the fox's chakra in herself, but also managed to adapt to its use. Every year, more and more demonic chakra mixed with her own, creating a unique, hitherto unseen golden chakra. According to the forecasts of the Iranians, by the age of 16, Aiko will completely absorb the entire fox chakra and her own stock will exceed the volume of her father's SEC by more than 50 times. What can be grown out of her by the age of 20, one Shinigami is known, but the fact that she will surpass her parents by 7 heads ahead was beyond any doubt. Perhaps she will become the strongest person in history after Rikudo. Hokage dreamily rolled his eyes and slammed the gate of their personal training ground, after which he began to study with his beloved daughter. In the dark window of the 3rd floor, a pair of blue eyes sparkled, from which clear, transparent as rock crystal tears flowed. Looking longingly after the departing relatives, Naruto could not understand, why does everything go to her? Why does every cross person literally melts with emotion at the sight of his sister, but as soon as his gaze catches on a little boy, the strained mask of a kind uncle or aunt disappears without a trace, replaced by burning hatred and angry snuffling. Naruto at such moments it seemed that if his father were not there, he would be torn to pieces. Father. Why does he spend all his time only on her? Why does he train with her for at least 3 hours every day, and he doesn't even want to look at him? Why does even he look at him like a predatory beast, with fear and distrust, with the absence of the slightest hint of affection and love? Mom. Mom was everything to Naruto, and every day without her dragged on like an eternity. There was no one to comfort the boy offended by life. There was no one to tell him that everything would be fine and everything would work out for him. There was no one to say that he was loved. Naruto moved away from the window, collapsed on the bed, burying his face in the pillow, and quietly began to cry, as he had every day before. Danzo, however, overdid his attempts to seize power. Not finding a better option for seizing power, he suggested to the leader of the Uchiha clan to arrange a civil coup. Fugaku reported this to the Hokage, and he sent the short-sighted schemer to the most guarded prison in the Land of Fire, away from Konoha. His place was taken by the former 3rd Hokage, whom Namikaze trusted as himself. A lot of effort was spent on the rehabilitation of the root fighters, turned into animals capable only of following orders, but it was worth it. The root, under the leadership of Sarutobi, turned from a terrifying institute for the destruction of the human personality into a completely worthy special unit, in no way inferior to foreign analogues. However, the Fugaku was also not made with a finger. By turning Danzo in with his guts, he diverted Minato's suspicions from himself. The Uchiha had been planning to make a coup on their own for a long time, of which they had a lot. Besides, the Hughes, although they were not going to support them, swore not to hinder them. After the first unsuccessful attempt on the Hokage, he immediately began to suspect where the wind was blowing from, and assigned spies from the best people of the former route to Fugaku. They discovered what Minato was so afraid of: the Uchiha were ready to attack at any moment. Reluctantly, Hokage, together with the elders, ordered the best and most loyal ANBU fighter to kill the conspirators. By an unfortunate coincidence, it turned out to be Itachi. The young man fulfilled the task with honor, after which he took the blame on himself and left Konoha, which the powerful persons could not even dream of. The only person he couldn't kill was his younger brother. Sasuke did not know about the impending conspiracy and blamed Itachi for everything, so they decided to let him live. Every day turned into a nightmare for Jinchuriki. The father did not deny his beloved daughter anything and did not prevent her from making fun of her brother. At first, Naruto himself didn't care about her attempts. He had been withdrawn into himself for a very long time and practically didn't pay attention to what was going on around him, and even such trifles as a door handle smeared with toothpaste or chicken eggs placed in house slippers were clearly unable to get the boy out of himself. Then the vain spoiled girl, who became a real bitch by the forces of a loving father, decided to toughen her jokes. When an innocent sister, passing by the boy, poured an almost full mug of steaming tea on him, Naruto could not stand it. "Bastard, what are you doing, you damn thing?" The blonde man shouted at the top of his voice, exhausted by years of loneliness surrounded by seemingly the closest people who, according to the creator's idea, should love and protect him. Naruto had no doubt that his sister had done it on purpose. She had been pestering him as much as she could for a whole month. "Dad, he's swearing." The girl sobbed resentfully, pouting her lips and glistening with tears in the corners of her eyes. Minato gave his son such a slap, from which he collapsed from his chair. The boy howled like a wounded wolf, pressing his palm to his reddened cheek. His scalded chest and knees were not enough for him, so his father also let his hands go. "How do you talk to your sister, you bastard? She doused me on purpose." Naruto howled. "She didn't do it on purpose, and you insulted her. Go to hell with you." The boy screamed and rushed to his room, which in recent years has become his only refuge from a cheerful family. Minato sighed heavily and followed. The dope had to be beaten out of the children. Hokage knocked on the door. "Naruto, open the door for me, now." "No. Get out." There was a shout from the other side. "Open the door, or I'll break it down to hell." Minato started to get angry. Aiko, who had crept up unnoticed, peeked around the corner on the landing. Sobbing, Naruto let his father into his room. He whipped his ass with a belt, ranting about the dangers of profanity. The boy screamed as if he was being cut alive with a red, hot knife. The Hokage's hand was heavy. The girl giggled maliciously. This goat dared to insult her, and now he will pay for it. After a couple of minutes, Minato left Naruto's room and closed the door, then went back down to the kitchen, where Aiko was sitting at the table as if nothing had happened. "Daughter, you did it by accident, didn't you?" "Of course, Daddy." The little girl made an angelic face and began to clear the table. Minato thought for a minute about what he had done. It seemed to him that he had acted too harshly with his son. Nevertheless, a glass of boiling water on an almost naked body is very painful. However, the Hokage calmed himself with thoughts that he was thus paying attention to him and taking care of his upbringing. Naruto was lying in bed, smeared with tears and snot. He was simply destroyed. the physical pain was barely a tenth of the suffering that the boy was experiencing. He was beaten by his own father. Is it really more acceptable to cause him hellish pain than to call his dearest sister the way she deserves? This is nonsense, fucking nonsense. Why does his father treat him like a dog? Is it really just because he can't tear down walls with fireballs? Mom says that children are loved regardless of their success, just because they are children, part of their parents, their heritage, their best creation. Naruto's reflections led him to a logical conclusion that had been begging for a very, very long time: his father does not love him. This simple thought caused a storm of despair in the boy's soul, from which he roared so that the glass in the window of his room rang. Time passed. It was relentless, like a hungry nine-tail. The Hokage children turned 8 years old. Both were enrolled in the academy without any questions. Aiko immediately joined the team and became the local queen of the class, with a whole retinue of girlfriends and a crowd of admirers. Around Naruto, zone of complete alienation was formed almost instantly. No one was sitting with him, let alone at the same desk. All the neighboring desks in front, behind, and even on the side were empty. The children looked at the boy with open hostility. Caring parents buzzed their children with stories about a terrible demon hiding under the guise of the Hokage's son. All Aiko's friends were amazed at her bravery, because she lived with this monster in the same house. This is something else. I put this idiot in his place right away when he buragazed. Jinchuriki boasted. This remark was accompanied by a surprised and delighted sigh from the entire female half of the class and the malicious, mocking, murderous laughter of all the guys. On the very first day, Naruto lost all chances not only to make friends, but also to study normally. On the way home, Aiko made fun of her brother all the time. What a loser you are, Naruto. On the first day, you managed to scare all the guys away. Isn't it through your efforts, you reptile? Uzumaki hissed through his teeth, for whom every second spent next to his sister was worse than a millennium of hell. Keep your sharp tongue behind your teeth, you jerk, or I'll show you what my father taught me. Shut your fucking mouth. The blonde couldn't stand it and punched his sister in the jaw. In any case, he thought he had hit. Aiko easily dodged an inept blow and, pumping a hole in the chakra into her fist, dealt a crushing blow to the boy in the solar plexus. An unprepared, untrained boy flew 10 meters through the air and crashed to the ground, plowing a long furrow in it. All such a cute and pretty girl kicked her brother in the head and squatted down in front of him. If you tell your father, I'll kill you. Having said that, Aiko went home, leaving the boy foaming at the mouth in the middle of a dusty street. The kindest-hearted fellow citizens simply could not miss such a great opportunity to vent their anger on the malicious Kyuubi. A couple of men who were tipsy lifted the guy by the collar and started beating him. People passing by not only ignored the desperate cries for help, but also stood in a ring around the outrage, watching with all eyes the beating of a helpless child with faces distorted with malice, encouraging the "well done" with loud shouts. When Jinchuriki began to resemble a chop, and the drunks got tired of beating him, they threw the boy into the mud and went about their business. The people sighed in disappointment. A couple of particularly dissatisfied ran up and kicked the exhausted body several times, but in the end, even they left him alone. Sobbing, choking with sobs, Jinchuriki got to his feet with great difficulty and, swaying like a drunkard, wandered home, flooding the dusty road with ruby drops of blood mixed with tears, cradling his numb left arm on his chest. It looks like it was broken. Both of his eyes were darkened with bluish-black eyes, a thin scarlet trickle flowed from his broken nose. A couple of teeth were knocked out, for nothing that milk. The whole chest was just burning with pain, obviously, not one rib was broken. Aiko greeted her brother with a cry of horror, even contempt receded into the background. Who is that for you? Simple, peasants. Thank you. That she threw me to them to be torn apart, Databeo, but I didn't know that everything would turn out like this. Jinchuriki was indignant. The momentary pity for the starving man disappeared without a trace and was replaced by a cold calculation: you need to go to the hospital. Come on. You're a genius. The boy broke into a scream and went to his father's room. Above the bed, above the half where Kushina slept, there was a button to call a doctor. The last year in her mansion was hard for her mother. 5 minutes later, the Irionans arrived at the house with a stretcher. Aiko had been sitting in the kitchen painting her nails all this time, as if nothing had happened. When they saw who the patient was, they almost left, but duty still outweighed personal hostility, and Naruto was taken to the hospital. The doctors worked as if they were doing the blonde a big favor, by force, somehow, and very, very slowly. The father came in the late afternoon, made sure that his son was fine and sat on his bed. Naruto, how did you do that? Aiko beat me up and left me on the street, and passers-by added. Really? But Aiko tells me that you cursed drunks, which is why you were attacked. What? Yes, like her. You bastard. Jinchuriki sobbed and punched the bedside table. Don't be a bully. So be it, I'll assign one chunin to guard you. I don't need your handouts. Go away, leave me alone. The boy shouted, dropping tears on his bandaged chest. Whatever you say. Minato went out the door. Come and see. The blond man howled and leaned back on the bed, looking at the whitewashed ceiling. When the last bruise came off the striped face, Jinchuriki was discharged. He wanted to go to his mother, but froze in indecision. You can't burden her with your problems. On the contrary, you need to support her, say that everything is fine with him, because it's much harder for her now. Sighing heavily, the blonde knocked on the door of the VIP ward for cancer patients. There was no response. Then Jinchuriki became worried and entered the ward. To his relief, Kushina only fell asleep. Coming closer to her, the boy began to examine the tired face, dotted with fine wrinkles. Yes, during these 2 years, my mother has lost a lot. Naruto was afraid to imagine what would happen. When will she die? Would he really be left alone, all alone in this cold and cruel world? The boy shuddered and shook his head, wiping his sleeve with tears that had come up at the wrong time. No, no, she won't die. We need to drive away these damn thoughts. She's going to get better, she's going to get better. Naruto sobbed and wandered home, trying to convince himself that everything would be fine. But everything was already very bad. Neither his father nor even his sister bothered to visit him. Not once. Okay, Minato, he's still a Hokage, but Aiko. It's her fault. From Antu, every bruise, every fracture is only her fault. Doesn't she have a drop of conscience and compassion? Did she really give a damn about her brother? Naruto just couldn't believe it. How so? Why, for what? Why does everyone hate him so much? When Naruto got home, he found his sister in the kitchen. Oh, cripple, it's you. Anger immediately bubbled up inside the boy, blind, senseless and merciless. The nit. The blond man shouted and threw a glass at his sister. She easily caught it and put it on the table. Are you immortal? Aiko hissed angrily, cracking her fingers and meaningfully shaking her fists. Shameless bastard, I hate you. The blond man blurted out, breathing heavily, after which he rushed to his room in disgrace and locked the door. I'll get you again, asshole. Aiko kicked the long-suffering piece of wood that has become Naruto's best and only friend for these 2 years. Jinchuriki sobbed bitterly and whined softly. He was right, his sister hated him with all her heart. After a few minutes, the blond man slammed his fist into the wall and squeezed his eyes shut in pain. He swore to himself that no one would ever see his tears again. Since the whole world hated him, he could only count on himself. Oh, Rikudo, give me the strength to survive this hell. Naruto exhaled softly and fell into a restless sleep. Years passed, and persistent training allowed Naruto not only to match his peers, but even surpass them. A couple of unsuccessful attempts to beat Jinchuriki by simple villagers further embittered the people, but now they expressed their anger only at a distance. The genin exam was approaching, for which Jinchuriki was preparing tirelessly, doing physical training until he was blue in the face and gaining control of the chakra. A week before the most important day in their lives, Naruto and Aiko celebrated their 12th birthday. The girl was sitting in a resort house on hot springs surrounded by a dozen best friends. Even Jinchuriki herself didn't know how many good friends she had. The table was bursting with damn delicious food and sweets. Everyone drank tea and had fun, showering congratulations to the hero of the occasion. Minato ordered food in advance and pushed his daughter onto a couple of ANBU, sitting with a martyred look in the next room and listening to the cheerful children's hubbub behind the wall. In the corner there was a whole mountain of gifts, half of which were for my father. The amount of money spent on a holiday for a beloved daughter was measured by dozens of fees for a C-rank mission, on one of which a family of 3 could comfortably exist for almost a month. The head of the village was at work at that moment. He decided not to interfere with his daughter's communication with friends, because they would still have plenty of time to be alone. Naruto, forgotten by everyone, was sitting at home all alone, locked in his room, looking at a tiny cupcake with a dying candle and clutching several postcards in his hands. They were all from the mother. One of them was last year's, the second one was quite fresh. Kushina handed it to her son without getting out of bed and not even moving, just pointing with her eyes to the bedside table on which the cherished piece of cardboard lay. A woman exhausted to the point of death, covered with a network of deep wrinkles, with huge bags under her eyes, did not even have the strength to say something to her son. Aiko still did not know that her mother was dying. They had not seen each other for more than a year. The father decided to protect the child from psychological trauma in this way. Naruto, by hook or by crook, rushed to the ward to the only person who loves him, and still achieved his goal, because Minato gave up on his son. Let him do what he wants. The blonde man opened the postcard and began eagerly reading the few lines written in clumsy letters, not at all similar to the almost calligraphic writing in last year's message. Son, you're not a stupid boy, and you realized a long time ago that I was dying. Most likely, this is my last message, and very soon, I will go to a better world, leaving you to the mercy of fate. I learned from a good friend of mine that your whole life is a living hell on earth. Baby, I tried my best to influence your father and your sister, but it seems that my words affected them exactly the opposite. Reluctantly, I'll tell you, go away. Leave Konoha, fail the genin exam so that no reward is announced for your head, as for the head of Nuke Nin, and leave. Go to the cloud, they are our enemies and will be happy to capture the son of Hokage. When it comes to them that he doesn't care about you, you will most likely be released, and maybe even accepted into the village. Even though you're an adult, I can't send you on such a dangerous journey unarmed. You and your sister are the last of the Uzumaki family. You both rightfully own the relics of our clan, but Aiko is unworthy of them, so they will all go to you. These are a pair of blades, fiery twins. They cannot be broken or blunted, they will break through any armor or protective jutsu. Perhaps they have other properties, but I don't know about them. The hiding place is in our bedroom, the button is under the 9th floorboard, starting from the far left corner. That's all I can give you, son. Be strong but fair. Don't be like your father and sister, you are above it. Know that I love and have always loved you, more than anyone in the world. I'm sorry for everything, I kiss you, Mom. At the end of the message, Naruto was crying his eyes out. The blonde man got down on his knees and threw his head back. For what? Why her? Why me? The question was drowned in mute silence. Wiping away bitter tears, Jinchuriki grinned viciously. he swore to himself not to cry anymore, but, when it hurts so much in the soul, it's impossible to hold back tears. And so, another brackish drop fell with a soft slap on the oak plank floor. The rest of the day passed in silence for the blonde, until late at night his father came home drunk to the board. Naruto listened warily to the soft footsteps and heavy snuffling coming up the stairs to his door. A powerful blow tore the wooden canvas from its hinges, and Minato stumbled into the room unsteadily standing on his feet. Seeing his son in front of him, the Hokage went into a rage. His eternally calm and unperturbed face was distorted by a bestial, demonic grin. You killed her." He growled through his teeth, and a blue vortex of chakra began to swirl in his palm. Naruto was paralyzed with horror. He realized that now he would be killed. Having formed a Rasengan, Minato tried to hit his son with it, but alcohol slowed down his reaction, and the trained boy was able to dodge. Hokage turned the cabinet behind him into splinters, and Naruto, clutching tightly in his hand now exactly the last words of his mother, rushed into the gaping black doorway. Minato ran after him, tearing open the wooden wall with his favorite technique, but the boy got his bearings in time, interrupted the fifth step with a powerful kick and jumped out of the window, knocking out the glass with his elbow. Following on his heels, his father tumbled down the stairs, tearing a tendon on sharp wooden fragments, and sprawled on the floor, slamming his head into the windowsill, breaking his nose and cutting his face with shards of glass. The blond man who ran a couple of 100 meters away from the mansion bent over and leaned his hands on his knees, breathing heavily. She died, and her father blamed him for it, even though he had done absolutely nothing wrong. It looks like he's just crazy, like the whole damn village. And all their madness goes to him, and his sister only cakes and gingerbread. Such is the justice. The blond man was surprised to note that there were no more tears left, as well as senseless self-pity, which had been strangling him for all these years, no worse than a noose around his neck. If the mother before her death told her beloved son to leave, then nothing keeps him here anymore. Naruto slowly crept to the broken window, and found his father lying unconscious on the plank floor. Carefully climbing over the windowsill, the boy walked around the man's body and headed to his parents' bedroom. After looking at the crumpled piece of paper once more, he found the hiding place and picked up an unexpectedly light oak plank with his nails. Breaking off one nail and hissing strangely, Jinchuriki lifted the board like that and found a small lever under it. Lowering it, Naruto jumped to his feet. The wall behind him with a hideous grinding of stone on stone slid aside, revealing a narrow pointed arch, behind which the unknown was hidden in the impenetrable darkness. Going inside, the boy lit a tiny ball of fire on his fingertips, illuminating a small secret room. Looking around, the boy could not restrain a surprised exclamation. A pair of blades of blood-red metal hung on the far wall. Coming closer, the blond man discovered that the swords were covered with bizarre patterns resembling flames, and a chain of small hieroglyphs ran along the buttocks in a smooth path, which it was absolutely impossible to make out in the dark. Deciding that he didn't have much time, Naruto postponed the study of the loot for later, ran back into the bedroom, tore the bedspread off the bed, took out a bundle of bills from the bedside table, put it in his pocket, and, returning to the hiding place, began to throw everything valuable on a piece of cloth. In addition to the swords, he got a whole bunch of small scrolls, 5 metal tablets with kaiji designating each of the elements, several rings, amulets, as well as a suspiciously huge scroll. All scrolls have a scroll, I must say. Taking a bundle of weapons and small things under his arm and a large roll of paper, the blond man, awkwardly waddling, hobbled to the pantry and dug out a huge tourist backpack there, into which he shoved the goods, attaching a coil of rope to the side. Cursing, Naruto rushed to his room, put a pouch with a throwing weapon on his belt, took a warm vest and ran downstairs. Grunting from the strain, the boy lifted, almost, his weight, of course, not without the help of the chakra in his legs and back, and already much more cheerfully trotted to the exit. For a second, he froze in front of his defenseless father sprawled on the ground. The thought came to his mind, and not to kill him for all the kindness and affection that he had been bestowing on him for 12 long years? Naruto snorted angrily from contempt for himself. He is not a rat to kill a sleeping, now definitely an enemy. Tearing off a piece of clean, though crumpled paper from the postcard, Naruto took a piece of glass smeared in Minato's blood and wrote in clumsy hieroglyphs to, "I'll come back, and then you, Aiko, and the whole damn village will answer for my wonderful childhood." The blonde man put the paper in front of his father's face and kicked him with all his heart, then jumped out of the window and disappeared into the night darkness. Naruto ran fast, but carefully, so as not to catch the eye of random passers-by. Having reached the village wall, the blonde faced the most serious obstacle on the way to his freedom. Remembering his training, Jinchuriki gave the chakra to his legs and slowly, almost breaking his spine with a heavy load behind his back, wandered up, drenched in hot sweat from the strain. After looking around at the last quarter of the way and waiting for the sentry to lazily stomp from one gatehouse to another, the boy climbed the wall and, threading a rope into the ring of the kunai hammered into the stone with his own hands, went down much faster and disappeared into the thick rustling foliage of the great Konoha forest. Minato came to his senses closer to morning, slowly got up from the floor, hissing from the pain in his leg and face, as well as his head splitting from a hangover and concussion. His eyes were glued shut from the dried blood dripping from his forehead, cut by shrapnel. Opening his eyelids, the blond man rolled his eyes and clenched his jaw tightly, trying to remember the events of last night. Memory resolutely refused to help, then Hokage tried to get up and collapsed on the floor, hissing in pain. Looking at the leg, he found out the reason: the Achilles tendon was torn. After examining the room, Minato began to remember his attempt to kill his own son yesterday. Remembering the reason, the man howled like a wounded wolf. His soul mate, Kushina, died yesterday at 20 hours and 18 minutes, dying in a long and agonizing agony in his arms for more than an hour, drilling her husband with an empty, expressionless look. Minato couldn't think of anything better than drowning grief in a glass, although he knew perfectly well that he was scarier than Mato Guy when drunk. The spiritualized brain built a logical chain. Kushina died because of Kyuubi, his soul is sealed in Naruto, which means Kushina died because of Naruto, idiot. Hokage groaned in a strangled voice and covered his face with his palm, after which he began to call his son Naruto. Naru. Here Minato noticed that a piece of paper soaked in blood was glued to his palm, on which hieroglyphs were indistinctly read. "I'll come back, and then you, Aiko, and the whole damn village will answer for my wonderful childhood," Hokage muttered softly. "Damn it, damn, Shinobi growled through his teeth, jumping on the surviving leg and jumping up the stairs. His worst fears were confirmed. The hot-tempered son took out everything valuable that was in their house. At that moment, a door slammed downstairs, and a girlish squeal rang out in the house. "Naruto! Dad! Are you alive?" There was a loud stomp, and after a couple of seconds, Konoha's pride was in her parents' bedroom. The girl almost collapsed to the floor when she saw her bloodied father, looking with a lost look into a dark opening in the wall, which had not been there before. "Dad?" Kunoichi asked timidly, approaching her father from behind. "My daughter, I have a serious conversation with you," Minato said softly. Turning on one leg, juicy grass gently rustles underfoot, and a backpack stuffed to the brim puts a pleasant weight on the shoulders reinforced with chakra. A light breeze ruffles the crowns of the trees, sleepy birds have just begun to chirp, and the dawn has already turned red in the east. "I am free, I am finally free, I have escaped from this branch of hell on earth, and no one will dare to mock me anymore. Someone will say that I feel sorry for myself too much, that I am a man, and should take the blows of fate with dignity. That's what my mother used to say, but she's no longer in this world, and I no longer have the strength to endure this ice-cold, indifferent bastard who deserved my mother's love in some unknown way, and this arrogant, worthless bitch who did not make a drop of effort to gain her power. For 12 years I have endured, for 12 years I have been silent, but the time has come, I have 1,000 opportunities to repay the debt in full. It was only when I was 50 miles away from the village, when my legs were no longer able to hold my body in the air, that I made my first stop. I had no right to make a mistake. There was no doubt that several ANBU brigades would be sent for me in a couple of hours. They will inevitably find me if I don't think of something. Maybe something from the loot will help me out. Which scroll is better? Probably the one that's bigger. Yeah, concrete logic, but there's nothing to object to. I take a weighty bundle out of my satchel, unfold it and start reading. After a few seconds, I realized that the information was encrypted, and in my hearts I almost threw out a seemingly useless load when my gaze caught on one obscenely short jutsu. There was only one seal in it, vaguely resembling the harem of ordinary illusory cloning, but still, it wasn't her. After fiddling a little with my fingers, I repeated the depicted seal and said the cherished 4 words. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 24 of my exact copies appeared in front of me in a cloud of white smoke. Guys, scatter. Confuse the tracks as much as you can, hi. There was a friendly response of 20 copies, after which I was left in proud solitude. Fatigue immediately fell on me like a multi-ton granite block. Still, using jutsu 5 minutes after reading the theory is clearly not the best idea. The chakra was almost at 0, but I achieved my goal. Even such an idiotic trick will delay the pursuers for several days, because the clones imitate even the smell. Thanks to fate for such a gift, it is incomprehensible to the mind how useful this technique is. After going through the same amount, I ran into a very unpleasant problem, which is forgotten by almost all lovers of telling stories about long trips around the world. I rubbed my leg. Yes, just like that, I took it and rubbed it, because I was wearing these idiotic sandals. Every step was given a sharp pain, so I was forced to make a halt, and this time, until morning, hoping with all my might for a miracle, because I didn't even take a banal ointment for scratches and abrasions. A miracle still happened. In the morning I was as good as new. I have noticed for a long time that small wounds on me heal like on a dog, and fractures heal after a couple of days, and this time my only talent did not let me down. There was no ANBU, and this is definitely a big plus. There was no food either, but this is no less a minus. After looking around and noticing a chain of boar tracks, I slowly followed the supposed lunch. I have never hunted before, but I will never believe that a candidate for genin could not cope with a miserable pig. As it turned out, I did not believe in vain. Instead of the desired suckling pig, I ran into a seasoned cleaver, weighing 200 kilos. Seeing me, the beast with a menacing roar rushed into a frontal attack, trying to rip open my stomach with huge dirty yellow fangs, from which tufts of foam fell. Jumping up a few meters, I missed the boar under me and, doing a somersault, threw 3 martens into the fleshy body. The forest resounded with a shrill screech, drowned out by my curses. And the devil pulled me to do all this pathos. The flap of the backpack opened, and the precious luggage fell to the ground. Having lost a significant amount of mass, I could not cope with landing and collapsed on my back. The enraged animal, despite the punctured lungs and the dissected carotid artery, rushed to the attack in a last furious rush. I barely managed to roll to the side, but the Uzumaki clan scrolls were not engaged in athletics, and most of them were buried under the hooves. The staggering boar finally gave up the ghost and collapsed 10 meters behind me, flooding the morning dew-covered grass with bright scarlet blood. Getting close to the pile of crushed paper, I squeezed my head with my hands and groaned in frustration. Only half of the 10 scrolls survived. Having dug out the remains of the second half, I rolled my eyes bitterly. The paper was torn and soaked with dirt and blood. It was absolutely impossible to read anything. Getting to my feet, I looked at the shaggy carcass with hatred and, coming closer, gave her a savory kick. Damn brute, even before his death he managed to shit. After kicking the prey a little more for my own comfort, I called a couple of clones, and they quickly began to skin the boar, while I went to pack my things. Half an hour later, I had at my disposal quite a decent skin and as much fried meat as I weighed myself. I already had to summon a clone for transportation, but what can I do? A lot of luggage is better than its absence. Having refreshed myself on the move and drunk from a small stream, I felt like a man. Suddenly, my brain was flooded with a flood of information. Thoughts, feelings, pictures, sounds, smells, all this mixed into an indistinguishable cacophony, but after a few seconds I opened my eyes and realized that these were the memories of my clone, who was overtaken by a chase sent by a compassionate father. Quickly realizing what this threatens me with, I almost ran in the opposite direction from the pursuers. Every 10 minutes a new clone died, making me more and more nervous with useless information. But apart from this genocide of doppelgangers, nothing interesting happened until sunset. There were no roads in this part of the forest, because I was making my way through the very wilderness, where mighty and ancient trees grew, sounding with chakra no worse than Aiko. So I tried to confuse the chase even more. Stupid and naive, you can't fool a professional, but in combination with new clones periodically sent out in all directions, it gave at least some chances of success. The third day was full of surprises. After breakfast, having concocted some kind of skin from a piece of skin, but still a wineskin, and having filled it with water from the stream, I stomped on with a happy face. But fortune turned to me again with her buttocks studied in every detail. The backpack tore. I had to summon 5 clones and drag the battered relics of the clan in a crowd in the spreading fabric. Remembering all the strong words that I had only heard, I froze in indecision. My path was blocked by a vast clearing overgrown with low bushes. In the middle of it was a dark hole, from which came the soft howling of the wind and a sickening, sickly sweet smell of rot. "Guys, check what's in there." The clones nodded synchronously and ran inside. "How accommodating, it's just wonderful." "Damn, another false fugitive was nailed. This is the 89th. When will they get bored, in the end?" Sitting down on a bale of things, I began to wait, carefully looking around. So far into the great forest of the Land of Fire, only bandits and hunters for rare game poked around, next to which the boar I killed would seem like a suckling pig. Needless to say, in such a wilderness there was a illusory chance to stumble upon at least the Nukneen base, which this tunnel looked very much like. But there's no news from the clones yet, so there's no cause for concern, is there? As if mocking me and my aspirations, one of the copies dissipated, giving me the collected information. The dungeon was simply colossal. It had been abandoned for a long time, judging by the layer of moss, more than 3 centimeters thick on the walls. The clone did not disperse of his own free will. He stumbled upon a hefty scolopendra, who decided to profit from a human. The second clone did not take long to wait, and the others followed him. It looks like these creatures had a nest there. Cursing, I took out a piece of fried meat and, deep in thought, began to chew it melancholically. The shelter is noble, even very. The clones have seen some medical and not so much equipment, which may well be useful when learning new techniques. And the shelves with documentation also inspired respect. Although it was unclear what was inside, the clones died too quickly. I have a lot of chakras. I managed to recover overnight. The consumption of chakra per clone also fell. A meager, but still practice, made itself felt. I think I can summon about 50 clones, and with such an army, you can try to retake the dungeon. Nodding to myself and chewing the meat, noting with displeasure the slight taste of rotten meat, I put the plan into execution. 50 spears with a loud hooting tumbled into the dungeon and began to pelt the scolopendra with kunai. The thick chitinous shell easily restrained the pathetic attacks, but this gave the clones time to bypass the hissing and confused rushing enemy and attack him from the rear. Jumping on the insect's back, the clones hammered kunai between the plates of the shell, cutting the nerve cord and leaving the millipedes writhing on the floor in convulsions. The clones simply crushed the cubs and eggs of the creeping reptiles with their feet. Although with great losses, but the copies coped. After 2 hours there was not a single scolopendra left in the dungeon. 17 rather grinning blondes fell out of the bunker and helped me drag things to a new place. Once inside, I immediately felt the chakra of the forest surrounding me completely disappeared. The dungeon was protected by seals. It was the perfect place to hide from the chase. However, piles of organic matter in every corner filled the bunker with a sickening stench, and it was extremely uncomfortable to be in it. For the next week, my clones were engaged in general cleaning. The bunker was vast, it had a lot of locked doors, which I could not open even with the help of ninjutsu. The chase was finally thrown off my trail. A dozen clones from the first batch scattered due to lack of chakra, without outside help. Having finally calmed down, I completely immersed myself in studying the surviving scrolls of my clan, sitting on a cracked chair in front of a cracked table, illuminated by a pair of still-burning electric lamps. Where the energy came from in this dungeon, I have not been able to find out. Surely the answer was hidden behind one of the locked doors. After a couple of hours, I learned more about the Uzumaki clan than in my entire past life. It was my pedigree that provided me with abnormal vitality and a huge amount of chakra, although my father's genes slightly spoiled the whole picture. After a thoughtful analysis of recent memories, I came to the conclusion that clones can be useful when studying techniques, and my gut did not let me down. The first technique that my ancestors studied in early childhood was a simple fuinjutsu, which allows you to seal an object weighing no more than a kilogram. I decided not to turn off the beaten track, and having created 36 copies and kicked them out to train on the street, after a couple of hours I was able to seal the stone in the table. The case has moved from a dead point. Then there were fire jutsu, not inferior in efficiency to the uchi analogues. Gokeijo no jutsu, or in other words a fireball, succumbed in 3 days. Deciding that I had had enough of theory, I took up the blades. When I went outside in person, I squeezed my eyes shut from the bright sunlight. After all, I had been sitting in the dungeon for too long and completely lost track of time, sending clones for everything necessary. A light morning breeze pleasantly stirred my hair that had not been washed for a long time, and I could not restrain a happy smile. For more than a week I had not seen the faces of village bumpkins and dearly loved relatives who had fed up with me. Gathering my thoughts and cutting the air in front of me a couple of times, I began to examine the weapon. Swords are like swords, nothing special, except that Mom's words about sharpness and durability were the purest truth. The stones were cut only on the way, without leaving a single notch on the blades. However, as soon as I put a drop of chakra in them, the chains of hieroglyphs on the buttocks lit up from the inside with a dim scarlet light. Making a sharp lunge forward, I almost threw the sword out of fear. The blade caught fire like an oil-covered torch. But this is interesting. Similarly, having singed the second blade, I watched the humming flame as if fascinated, writing intricate monograms in the air with the blades. The blades quickly heated up, acquiring a bright orange hue, but the handles remained cold. Driven by curiosity, I went to the entrance to the bunker and lightly chopped at the concrete arch. The result was stunning. The blade cut through the concrete like butter. Smirking, I began to destroy my own real estate, cutting off neat bricks from the monolith. However, not everything is Shrovetide for the cat. After a couple of minutes the flame went out, and I almost fell off my feet from fatigue. The weapon consumed a lot of chakras. Despite this, I was pleased to the point of indecency. Such rapid progress strengthened my faith in imminent success, and thoughts of losing all ties with Konoha no longer frightened me. The next 2 months passed as scheduled, getting up at 6 in the morning, fresh fish or scrambled eggs for breakfast, 3-hour fencing classes in the company of a couple of clones armed with sticks, persistent picking at the code of the Hokage scroll until lunch, game for this very lunch, clan history lessons until the evening. Unfortunately, All attempts to activate the rings and metal tablets with spontaneous hieroglyphs were unsuccessful. Scrolls describing the relics were destroyed by the cursed boar. The clothes were completely worn out and turned into a pile of rags, barely hiding the body. I had to improvise and sew clothes from the skins of wild animals. It turned out to be extremely miserable. I looked like a real Neanderthal depicted on the pages of textbooks of ancient history. There are no people around, and there was no one to appreciate what I turned into. All communication has descended to conversations for life in a circle of clones, you see, with yourself. Loneliness was slowly but surely driving me crazy. Every evening, I sat on the threshold of the dungeon, looking at the sunset blazing with a bright fire, and I was more and more afraid that in these endless trainings, I would lose myself. Of course, after my first training with swords, I began to open the thick metal doors one by one. They had no hinges. A multi-ton monolithic slab descended from the ceiling, tightly entering the grooves on the floor. I had to cut through the canvas. It took no more than half an hour for one door, but given my very meager supply of chakra, it took about 2 weeks. Behind the first door I found 2 rows of glass capsules filled with murky green slime, in which white-skinned humanoids, only vaguely resembling humans, swam. I shivered and shrugged my shoulders. Even my modest sensor abilities were enough to understand that the chakra circulates in their bodies, they are alive and in a coma, and only the Shinigami knows when they will wake up and what they will be capable of. Deciding that killing them was not an option, because the liquid could be toxic, I returned the piece of the door to its place and welded it to the canvas at several points, immediately feeling calmer. The other 2 doors protected more interesting things. Behind one of them was a warehouse of some spare parts, apparently not yet used. I couldn't figure out their purpose, but I singled out 5 clones for this, who began almost sniffing every piece of iron in the room. Behind the second door was a huge archive with scrolls. My eyes ran away from the abundance of shelves bursting with hundreds, thousands of media. Here I have already been generous with 15 clones, who scattered to the corners of the archive and began to select any useful information. As it turned out, most of the scrolls contained useless medical information for me, from which I concluded that forbidden experiments on people were carried out in this bunker. I have independently mastered very powerful fuinjutsu, useful in real combat. They allowed me to seal almost any technique in a small piece of paper, which I actively used, saving the most powerful ninjutsu that I only knew, namely, fire dragons. I stopped at the 20th scroll. I didn't have enough imagination to imagine a fight in which even half of this armful of waste paper would be needed. Of course, I didn't forget about the basic shinobi skills that make life much easier, such as walking on walls and water, enhanced jumps and heating the body with an accelerated flow of chakra. Now I could walk on the ceiling of my new lair without any problems and arrange a race for a fish along a rapid stream. And yet, my loneliness was destined to end on the 80th day after my departure from Konoha. In one of the thick clan scrolls, on the 10th meter of paper, I came across an image of a seal exactly repeating that on my stomach. This tattoo excited my imagination from a young age, because my sister had an almost identical one, but our parents answered all our questions with the most ingenious nonsense. As it turned out, such a seal was used to deter bijou. Putting 2 and 2 together, I realized that none other than Kubi was imprisoned in us, because all the other tailed ones were in other villages, which I learned about back at the academy at the boring lectures of Iruki-sensei. That's why everyone hates me, but why was my sister assigned to the rank of heroes in advance? The scroll said that the 9-tailed one had been divided into several parts before. Apparently, I got his consciousness, which is why I have a mustache, but Aiko doesn't. That's the reason for you. Bastards, stupid brutes, why does she get all the good things? In my heart, I break an innocent stool on the stone floor, but then I pull myself together. Surely Kyubi wants revenge as much as I do, then why don't we team up? Even without his power, he can be useful, because he obviously knows a lot. It's decided, let's go get acquainted. Sitting in the lotus position, folding a simple chain of seals taken from a scroll, and closing my eyes tightly, I was transported into my subconscious for the first time. At first glance, little has changed around, the same dungeon, except that it is slightly flooded. Scratching my head thoughtfully, I wandered forward. A dark tunnel led me into a huge hall, blocked in half by a powerful lattice. Coming closer, I shivered, cleared my throat and shouted, "Hey! QB! Are you here?" Suddenly, a pair of tiny scarlet lights lit up in the dark, slowly moving in my direction. After a few seconds, I realized that they were eyes. A few seconds later, I was speechless with shock. A pretty red-haired girl in an old-fashioned kimono came out, painfully similar to my mother in her youth. The beautiful face expressed only universal indifference and fatigue. "Where else would I be?" the girl asked quietly, not taking her eyes off me. Her gaze was extinguished, as if she had resigned herself to her imprisonment and lost the meaning of life. I swallowed convulsively and looked at the floor. If I had any thoughts about killing the culprit of all my troubles, now they have disappeared without a trace. Apparently, she got no less than mine. "You're like, are you okay?" A completely stupid and meaningless question came out. QB's face darkened, sparks of anger flashed in his scarlet eyes. "Did you come to mock me, puppy?" The demoness hissed venomously. "What are you?" I didn't even think. I stepped back, throwing up my hands in a defensive gesture. Suddenly, the girl chuckled softly and looked at me with poorly concealed curiosity. "I don't feel a lie in your voice. What do you want from me?" A red eyebrow curiously arched in a questioning gesture. I gave the answer, not doubting him at all. "I want you to help me destroy Konoha." Scarlet eyes almost fell out of their sockets, all the assumed equanimity flew off the fox, leaving no trace. "What?" That's all Kitsune managed to say. I grinned in response. The effect produced was priceless, as was the expression on the face of the Nine-Tails. "But, why?" The demoness stammered. "Believe me, I have good reasons for this." "So, will you help?" Kitsune thought, but only for a couple of seconds. "I'll help you if you give me back my lost strength." I frown indignantly. "And how will I do it?" QB snorts contemptuously and lifts his nose. "You will kill your sister and let me drink her soul." A malicious smile spreads over my face. "There could not be a better offer. Deal. In order to help you, I will need to go out into the real world." Kitsune looked at me with a hidden hope in her eyes, clearly still fearing that all this was a hoax, and I was about to start mocking her. I can't say that I felt sorry for her, but there was a certain sympathy. "What needs to be done for this?" The fox perked up, but I immediately nipped her insidious plan in the bud. "Don't ask me to remove the seal. I'm not going to die." The girl frowned angrily and hissed softly, "He's a smart boy, though you can't tell by the look of him." I blush in embarrassment, glancing at my dear skin tunic. "Okay, then let's conclude a contract for the summoning." A small scroll appeared out of nowhere on Kitsune's palm, which she threw to me between the bars. I easily caught it and carefully read the contents, occasionally squinting at the intensely frowning demoness. Seeing nothing suspicious in the contract, I bit my finger and signed with blood, then rolled up the scroll and returned it to the owner. Kitsune literally melted into a sugary smile and closed her eyes, clearly having received considerable pleasure. "And how can I summon you?" Kitsune looked at me like I was crazy, then covered her face with her palm and sighed heavily. "Baby, you disappoint me." "Well, okay, watch and remember." Ignoring my angry look, the fox slowly folded the chain of seals, then slapped the floor with her palm. "Remember?" I nodded silently and returned to the real world. The butt, frozen on the stone floor, immediately made itself felt with a dull aching pain. Hissing angrily, I got to my feet and, exactly repeating the actions of Kitsune, called her. The girl carefully looked around, and began to sniff, after a few seconds wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Is something wrong?" I asked cautiously. It smells bad in your cave, and you look like a savage yourself. Kitsune came up to me, hooked her tunic with her fingers and snorted disgustedly. I puffed out my cheeks resentfully and turned away. Kyubi laughed softly. Come on, baby, it's me, I have to grumble a little. Kitsune ruffled my dirty hair, knocking off my cold mask of equanimity. I'm already an adult. I blurted out and blushed with embarrassment. Kyubi smiled broadly and took her hand away. Well, then show me what you can do, and I'll decide what to teach you. Then it was my turn to smile. Still, 6 months of training have not passed without a trace. After taking the fox outside, I started with the most useful equipment in the household. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The eyes of the nine-tailed rose to her forehead. She was surrounded by 100 of my doppelgangers. Impressive. Anything else? Having coped with the first shock, Kyubi asked. Kato, go Keijio no Jutsu. The fireball scattered half of the clones, to which Kitsune replied with a contemptuous snort. The basic technique did not make any impression on her. If I had at least a drop of chakra, I would show you what a real flame is. Kyubi said haughtily. Oh, right? Well, hold on, I gather my courage and put half of the remaining chakra into the most powerful technique I have studied. Kato, Goryuka no Jutsu. The fire chakra burns the lungs and bursts out, turning into a giant dragon. With a deafening roar, the equipment flew 200 meters and exploded in the air, leaving behind a cloud of burning, more than 50 meters in diameter. I have not yet lost my mind to set fire to the forest. Kitsune whistled in surprise, causing me a twinge of pride. Not bad for a child, very good, I'm not a child. And anyway, now I'm going to fuck you with this jutsu. Rage demanded an immediate exit outside, which is why I pointedly stamped my foot. KHKHKH. I'm afraid, KHKHKH. The fox doubled over in a fit of laughter. I swung my hand at her, but only exhaled sharply and looked away. You can't beat girls, even if they are harmful. After half a minute, Kyubi was able to pull herself together and straightened up, breathing heavily and grinning fervently. Get ready, baby, all your previous workouts will seem like a rest in a warm bed to you. I swallowed convulsively. There was not a drop of falsehood in her voice. The first 2 weeks of training were very gentle. Kitsune did not try to teach me anything, only more carefully evaluated what she would have to work with. Kyubi very briefly and succinctly assessed my temporary shelter, which became my second home, the crypt. And indeed, the dark, gloomy walls of the dungeon pressed on the psyche. It is not surprising that I have long been visited by thoughts of suicide, and who knows if I would have been alive a couple of months later if I had not got a new friend? The solution was simple and obvious. I built a small house out of bamboo stems and leaves. Of course, I didn't bother with interior partitions, which I quickly regretted. When it was time to change, Kyubi didn't take her eyes off me, driving me into a blush in a couple of moments. The fox noticed this and laughed softly. KH, baby, do you really think you're even a little attracted to me? I flushed even more, but this time from resentment and indignation. Kitsune collapsed to the floor and laughed out loud. Then I gave up on her and changed the worn-out tunic to a new one. When are you going to wear something decent? Without any laughter in her voice, the nine-tailed calmed down asked, wrinkling her nose in disgust. Gods, how much she looks like her mother. I froze in place for a couple of moments, looking straight into the scarlet pools, feeling tears coming to my eyes. But no, you can't cry, you can't show your weakness to anyone, especially her. Kitsune blinked in bewilderment. I looked away and shook my head. Never, most likely. There are no shops nearby, the fox snorted contemptuously. Then I will sew clothes for us, since you are so crooked. I clapped my eyes in amazement. Bijou, who sews clothes? Can she also cook and wash? No, it's better not to be arrogant. You can grab the bells for that. In the late afternoon, we sat down by the fireplace on a couple of mats made of bamboo leaves. Behind the thin walls, the noise of the forest awakening from its daytime sleep could be heard, and a light breeze seeping through the cracks between the trunks pleasantly chilled the skin. "Yes, it's much better here than in my crypt," I drawled thoughtfully. Kitsune only chuckled softly, continuing to stare into the dancing flames. "QB. Tell me about yourself." The fox looked at me with an appraising look and shook her head. "No. To begin with, prove to me that you are worthy of my trust." I just sighed heavily and fell silent. Everything promised to be far from as simple as it seemed earlier, especially for training. Lisa sewed us short tunics, like my old one, but much more elegant and neat. As it turned out later, her former clothes consisted of pure chakra, ready for use at any moment, and was an inviolable stock of the fox, which survived even the separation of the chakra and the mind of the nine-tailed and was carefully guarded by her due to the inability of the QB to keep even a drop of chakra in her own body. Instead of shoes, she, like me, wrapped her feet with pieces of skin so as not to walk barefoot. It was difficult for me to take my eyes off her beautiful legs, but I managed to do it and suppress the unexpectedly manifested libido. This is wrong and indecent, and when training began, I forgot to think about reproduction. The next 9 months turned into a real hell for me. QB knew no pity, and drove me in a way I could not imagine. Despite the absence of a fox form due to the loss of almost all chakra reserves, she was stronger and more resilient than a simple person, so every morning we played catch-up. Kitsune ran after me with a bamboo stick, and whenever I slowed down a little, she hit me on the back. My attempts to snap back or take away the baton did not lead to anything good. The fox got into a pose and simply refused to train me. There was only one way out: to learn to run faster than a demon. 3 months later, I succeeded. At the 70th kilometer, Kitsune began to lose ground, and at the 80th she collapsed under a tree, breathing heavily. To be honest, I was no better, but I found the strength to go up to her and sit next to her. Well done," the demoness squeezed out of herself, to which I only nodded silently, suffocating from lack of oxygen. After the run, the OFP followed. QB managed to turn a harmless set of exercises into a real torture, where has it been seen that a puny kid squats with an adult ant on his shoulders? Nevertheless, the bamboo magic wand did its job. Starting with a single time, in a month I could do 20 squats, and in 6 months, a whole 100. Push-ups were about the same. At first, the nine-tailed simply pressed her foot on my back, and by the end of training I did not notice the weight of her entire body. The result of this bullying was an amazing musculature, for which it was possible to forgive Kitsune all her sins. Of course, OFP was only a small fraction of the training that the nine-tails conducted. All the time I was doing my body, at least 100 clones were learning new techniques. What flattered me was my short-lived being Sensei Kubi. I taught her shadow cloning, on my head. Now each platoon of a dozen clones has its own captain, watching every step of my copies. To my surprise, it turned out that the clones were no less lazy than myself, because the presence of Cerberus, dispelling careless copies at the first signs of parasitism, increased the efficiency of their work at times. Instead of learning new techniques, which I assumed, the fox taught me how to handle the fire chakra, and it was something phenomenal. I didn't just control the fire, it became a part of me. I felt every tongue of flame, every drop of orange-red chakra. An ordinary fireball, which was not even taught to genins at the academy, in a month in my performance, smashed concrete walls into crumbs, red-hot. And what the fire dragon did after graduation, it was scary to think. When I launched it into the sky and it exploded at a height of 100 meters, I was just knocked down by the shock wave, and the clones crowding around almost scattered. When I got up from the ground, I just opened and closed my mouth in amazement, but QB was dissatisfied with the result and drove me to train further. 3 months later, Kubi forced me to transform into a fire chakra my own, which flowed inside my body. Are you kidding? I'll burn like a match. Cases of the spontaneous chakra getting into the human SCC were held at the academy, and most often even one drop led to a fatal outcome, and sometimes even to the explosion of the body of the hapless experimenter. QB snorted contemptuously and crossed her arms over her chest. You will cope with her control, just roll the chakra into bundles so that it does not touch the walls of the channels. But it's impossible. Tell me, have I ever demanded something from you that you couldn't do? I froze with my mouth open and my finger raised to the sky. Indeed, there was no such case. Kitsune noticed my confusion and smirked smugly. Besides, I'll be there, and I can help you in case of failure, so stop breaking down and do what you're told. Finally calming down, I nodded silently and took a deep breath, closing my eyes. Concentrating, I felt a chakra center pulsing in my stomach. Having transformed a small part of it into a fiery one, I carefully directed it into the channels. A pleasant warmth spread almost instantly all over my body, as if I was in a heated bath, and I liked this feeling so much that I continued to transform the chakra, as if I had fallen into a trance. My mind was in ecstasy, and my body was exhausted from the pleasure of intimacy with the elements. I did not understand and did not realize what was happening. I didn't just feel the fire, I didn't just control it, I was fire, I was burning, I was burning. An elegant hand squeezed my shoulder, the claws entered my skin, which caused me to fall out of a deadly delusion and open my eyes, seeing the worried face of the Ninetales in front of me. Don't get carried away, QB said in a stern voice. I froze in place, continuing to look into the scarlet eyes. There was something elusive flickering in them, so dear and close to me that it is impossible to imagine. She was glowing from the inside with such a bright and warm glow that I wanted to cuddle up to her with all my soul, which I did. I didn't care that this was a 1,000-year-old evil demon who killed thousands of people. She became closer to me than anyone in my entire life, closer than my own mother. Kitsune froze with her mouth open and stared at me with indescribable indignation, hugging her tightly across her chest. And what does this mean? The fox asked in a grumpy tone, unable to free her hands from my embrace. QB, thank you for your help. You have become my family, which I never had. Well, please, Kitsune replied uncertainly, finally pulling out one hand and patting my hair. It looks like I surprised her, but how else could I treat her if she taught me almost everything I know, cooked my food and sewed clothes for me? QB hesitated for a few seconds, looked intently into my eyes and nodded to herself, as if she had made the most important decision in her life. My name is Kurama. I shuddered in amazement. For a demon there is nothing more precious than his name, because a person who knows him can easily subdue a powerful creature. Thank you for your trust, I whispered softly. You deserve it, the fox grinned, ruffling my hair. The rest of the day was spent in conversations about our past. After 6 months, I was still able to make friends with someone who was considered a soulless monster in the village, who in fact was 100 times more human than themselves. Being in unity with the elements, I was able to achieve much greater results in fire ninjutsu. The power of each of them has increased about twice, but Kurama said that this is only a small fraction of the opportunities that the presence of the fire chakra in my own chakra channels gives me. She said that when I managed to transfer my entire chakra to the last drop into the elemental, without burning to the ground, I will become a demon. I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds very tempting, although I am still very, very far away from that. At the moment only 1/100th of my spiritual energy was able to turn with the irresistible power of fire. Unfortunately, QB didn't help me deal with the artifacts. She didn't know anything about them herself. She couldn't teach me fencing either, and foxes didn't know how to swing swords. With a sad sigh, I put the relics of my clan on the back burner. Maybe they will come in handy later. Of course, no one forgot about taijutsu, but until the end of physical training, I practiced only with my own clones. QB motivated this by saying that she would tear me to pieces. It's a shame, of course, but there's nothing you can do, all in good time. And so, when it finally came, it happened that I still remember with shame my first training session with Kitsune. "Hit me," the fox said in a calm voice, flexing her shoulder and neck. "But, you can't beat girls." I objected, remembering what my mother taught me. "I even tolerated my sister, but why beat Kyubi? She's like a mother to me." Kitsune frowned viciously and came up to me, giving me a savory slap in the face. "Come on, hit me." I rub my reddened cheek with my palm and look at the demoness with resentment. The nine-tailed one weighed me a second bream, but I only hesitantly backed away. The fox sighed heavily and shook her head. Despite a difficult childhood, I was not too aggressive, and it was not so easy to get me off balance. "Understand, you can't hurt me with all your desire, because it's not for nothing that I've been chasing you like a dam for 6 months so that you have at least some chances, and you need to learn to stand up for yourself." I nodded silently and approached the fox, timidly trying to hit her in the stomach. The nine-tailed one grabbed my arm and threw me over her shoulder like a sack of potatoes, slamming me to the floor with all her might. To say that it was painful is to say nothing. Weakling, Kitsune spat contemptuously on the ground. Then I couldn't stand it anymore. No, this fool definitely won't get sick from a couple of slaps on the back of the head. Grabbing Kyubi by the leg, I abruptly pulled the limb towards me and forced Bijou to sit on the splits, on my face. Thin white panties from the chakra only formally covered the Kitsune. I perfectly felt all the forms that were hidden under them with my skin. And no matter how ashamed I was, I got very excited from such intimacy with a female body, despite my young years. Kitsune slowly got on all fours and looked under herself. Noticing my tomato-red face, and then catching sight of the tunic bulging in the groin area, Kyubi just laughed, making me blush even more. "Do you want to spend the night with Bijou?" I nod confusedly, because it won't get any worse anyway. I have already realized that from this day on, I will never be able to look at Kurama as before, and my desire will never fade. Kitsune smiled wryly and helped me to my feet, clearly reading all my thoughts on my face. "I think I can arrange it, but only when you defeat me in a fair fight." I almost choked with indignation. "You have some bad requests." Kyubi snorted contemptuously and frowned. "Do you think I need a male who is weaker than me? I'm not just wiping your snot off anyway. Should I also go to bed with you out of pity? Aren't you disgusted yourself?" I dejectedly lower my head and sigh heavily, stealing a glance at the unattainable legs of the nine-tail. Wait, why unattainable? I'm already running faster than her. What's stopping me from working out and getting stronger? Resolutely I raise my head and stand in a fighting stance. "Now you attack." Arrogantly beckoning the opponent with the palm of my hand. Kitsune grinned fervently and attacked me. It hurt. It hurts a lot. The fox fighting style had nothing in common with any human. The blows were very fast and accurate, although not too strong, but in the performance of the nine tails, each of them almost broke my bones. I didn't have time to dodge, and the blocks were meaningless. Kitsune simply bypassed them. Yes, Kurama in close combat would have twisted any fighter from Konoha in a few seconds, unless the masters of taijutsu could oppose her with something. Then what can we say about me, a graduate of the academy and a self-taught loser? But no matter how strong Kubi was, I didn't stand still. We beat each other for days on end. Fortunately, our superhuman endurance allowed, and every day the fights became longer and longer. By the end of the first month, I could hold out for more than 5 minutes, and a month later I managed to put Bijou on the shoulder blades. In every sense of the word. Giving up? I asked, twisting Kitsune's arm behind her back and slightly pressing her, just enough so that she realized the futility of resistance. The fox tried to pull away, but I increased the pressure, and Kyubi hissed in pain. "I give up," the nine-tailed muttered resentfully. I immediately let her go, and Kitsune stepped aside, began to rub her aching limb. I remembered her long ago promise, and a long-suppressed desire began to stir timidly in my soul. which had become almost unbearable during this time. "I won a fair fight, am I worthy of you now?" Kyubi froze and looked at me with an appraising look, tilting her head to the side, carefully examining every part and every muscle of my body. "Worthy," Kitsune replied and came up to me. "Do you want it right now?" asked the fox without any doubt. It seemed that she had already decided everything for herself for a long time. "Well, I'm not so concerned, let's wait for the evening, and now let's go wash and rest." The nine-tail nodded and smiled broadly. I grabbed her around the waist and together we went to the stream, taking a soap root with us. Taking off my tunic, I helped the obviously expectant Kurama to undress, noting with surprise the changes in her behavior. "It looks like I'm going to have to take care of her now, but I can't say I didn't like the prospect." Going into the water, I gently lathered the beautiful body, devouring it with my eyes and caressing the elastic breasts. Kitsune smiled slightly with pleasure, and when it came to the crotch, arched her back and put her hands on my shoulders, purring like a cat, which I had never noticed before. The sight of her was enough to excite me, and when she began to lather me, I almost attacked her after the first touch. We spent the rest of the day on the shore, holding each other's hands, only occasionally breaking the silence with a couple of meaningless phrases. We both needed time to understand and accept the changes that had taken place in the relationship between us. When it began to get dark, we quickly cleaned ourselves up and moved towards the shelter. 500 meters from the entrance to the dungeon, Kitsune froze as if rooted to the spot and noisily sniffed, tensely furrowing her eyebrows and shooting her eyes around. "Is something wrong?" I asked with undisguised concern. In my memory, Kurama had never behaved like this before. "I feel an unfamiliar chakra, dark, sinister and extremely powerful," Kitsune replied after a few seconds of silence. "CSR, if someone has found our shelter, then all our things will fall into his hands." I made the obvious conclusion. I wouldn't risk my life for some things. "Whoever it is, we can't handle him." "We're leaving," Kitsune said, turning in the opposite direction from our dwelling. Spitting on the ground in anger, I followed her example. After taking 10 steps, I accelerated and hurried the fox, feeling a gaze on my back, in which a cold, predatory thirst for murder was easily felt. We didn't have to run away for a long time. After half a minute, the pursuer, moving with inhuman speed through the branches of trees, overtook us and landed 50 meters ahead. Covering the nine-tailed one with myself, I pulled out 3 scrolls with fire dragons from a secret pocket on my belt and clamped them between the fingers of my right hand, tensely watching every movement of the stranger, preparing to discharge my entire very meager arsenal into him, despite the fact that I had at least brought something when I went swimming. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" Kyubi couldn't stand it, staring intently at the stranger, pale as death. "I am the owner of the laboratory that you destroyed and used for your own purposes." The stranger's lips were distorted by a crooked grin, and the dead snake eyes with a vertical pupil flashed so that my soul sank into my heels. Suddenly, a whole pack of senbons flew out of the bushes to our left. Easily dodging, I discharged one of the scrolls towards the supposed location of the enemy, and the other 2 at the owner of our temporary shelter standing in the same place. Powerful streams of flame melted the ground and set fire to the edge of the forest, but this time throwing weapons rained down on us from all sides, and it became increasingly difficult to evade it. Grabbing one of the kunai flying by, hoping to use it for self-defense, I was horrified to find that the bandage with which the handle was rewound was soaked with purple liquid. Immediately throwing the weapon aside, I felt my left arm go numb to the shoulder with lightning speed, and the deadly cold of paralysis slowly spread throughout my body. A pair of senbons went deep into the leg and stomach, completing what had been started. Unable to resist the poison, I collapsed to my knees. "Naruto!" Nine-tails screamed, rushing to me. Several senbons were immediately stabbed into her back, but Bijou only hissed irritably, hoisting me onto her shoulder and rushing into one of the few passages left in the ring of trees set on fire by dragons. When the demoness was almost at the goal, and a dozen senbons had already settled in her back and my ass, a pair of hands jumped out of the ground, grabbed Kitsune by the ankles and twisted as if there were not a single bone in her pale limbs. Kyubi screamed and collapsed on my head. Then there was only darkness and silence. I woke up from a bright light hitting my eyes. My head was splitting, my stomach was stuck to my spine, and my mouth was dry, like in the desert of the Suna. By simple reflection, I came to the conclusion that I have been lying here unconscious for several days. Kurama, I croaked, barely audibly, not recognizing my voice. Without waiting for an answer, I tried to contact the fox telepathically. Kurama. Kurama, answer me. The mere suggestion that something had happened to the nine tails was enough to throw me up to the ceiling, and only the steel bracelets on my arms and legs kept me in place. Stop. Bracelets? Am I tied up? Gradually, the picture of that shamefully short battle with the pale-faced stranger, which ended in a crushing defeat for me and Kyubi, surfaced in my memory. The mere thought of what this bastard could do to her, my mind was overshadowed by blind rage, succumbing to which I began to break out of my shackles like a madman. Of course, this did not lead to anything good. The bracelets rubbed their ankles and wrists until they bled, but they did not think to give in. But I still achieved a certain success. A shock of gray hair flashed through the tiny glass window of the metal door. There was a click of the latch being pulled back, and a teenager in round glasses entered the tiny room with white walls. Where is she? Answer me. I asked before he could open his mouth. The guy giggled nastily. You are not in the right conditions to arrange an interrogation. The bespectacled man grinned almost as vile as the owner of this dungeon, which made me immediately hate him. If I could move, I'd smash your head in, I growled through my teeth. But you can't, the bespectacled man replied with a mockery in his voice, snatching massive handcuffs from his belt. Snapping the bracelet on my left arm, he released it from its attachment on the cot. I immediately tried to grab him by the throat, but the guy pressed on some point under the elbow, and my hand hung limp with a whip, after which it was easier to chain it to the second hand. Behave yourself, I would not like to knock you out and drag you on my hump, the bespectacled man grumbled, shackling my legs with a half-meter chain. Bastard, I spat out with contempt in my voice. You can swear as much as you want, I don't care, the bespectacled man smiled wryly, lifting me to my feet and pushing me insistently towards the door. Deciding that there was no point in resisting further, I nevertheless deigned to obey the requirements of the bespectacled man and went forward, carefully looking around. The greasy cables snaking along the walls were unfamiliar to me, and the walls themselves were not stone, but metal. Did I miss another door? Or more than one? Damn it, who is this white-faced owner, if he could afford such a luxurious dungeon hundreds of miles from major settlements? And why did he abandon it? So, stop, I'm not thinking about that, Kurama still hasn't answered. What if she's dead? Then I'll hang these bastards on their guts next to Aiko and Daddy. Suddenly, a bright light hit our eyes, and we went out into a spacious hall with a dozen glass capsules, like those where humanoids were kept. There was a chicken in one of them. Without any hesitation, I hit the bespectacled man in the balls with my shackled hands and tried to recall the nine-tailed one. My idea failed miserably. The contract we signed required mutual consent to the call and recall. Cursing, I cursed the paranoia of the nine tails and hobbled to the capsule as fast as the short chain strumming on my legs would allow. Scum! The guy hissed, falling on his side. 10 seconds later I covered the distance to the capsule and folded the chain of seals. Kato, Tenken no Jutsu. I snapped. Nothing happened. I tried again to summon a narrow dagger from the flame, and when I realized that it was useless, I began to hammer on the glass wall with metal handcuffs. Meanwhile, the bespectacled man recovered and with an extremely serious face crept up to me from behind. Pretending that I didn't notice him, I continued fruitless attempts to break the armored glass until the last second. When the bespectacled man approached me at arm's length, I spun sharply on the spot, delivering a crushing blow to his temple with handcuffs. The guy did not have time to react and collapsed to the ground with a broken head. I immediately began to unceremoniously search his corpse, realizing that at any second a pale-faced man could come here and put an end to my spontaneous escape. Finding the key, I clamped it in my teeth and in a quarter of a minute I threw off the shackles. Grinning provocatively, I folded the short chain of seals again. Kato, Tenken no Jutsu. From the index and middle finger of the right hand grew a bright yellow blade of dense flame, a little more than 20 centimeters long. Carefully approaching the tip to the glass, I began to cut it so that the blade did not pass through, and it was not extinguished by the liquid filling the capsule. The work was painstaking and took an unacceptably long time, but there was no choice. I would rather die than leave the nine-tailed here. 2 minutes later, an ornament not provided by the manufacturer appeared on the capsule in the form of a deep furrow in the form of an uneven circle with a diameter of about a meter. Having dispelled the jutsu, I moved away from the glass cylinder for 10 steps and with a running start I jumped into the center of the circle with 2 legs in a jump. With a dull clang, the capsule burst, and I, along with a piece of glass, was thrown aside by a powerful stream of water. An unconscious Kyubi fell to the floor. Running up to her, I hoisted the demoness on my shoulder and rushed out of the hall. A narrow corridor with many doors led me to the stairs. Flight after flight, I rose to the surface, expecting an attack at any moment. When there were less than 3 meters to the cherished door B, the steps under my feet began to fail. Reflexively, I threw Kurama forward and jumped after him, but did not reach, hanging on the cracked threshold of the door, breaking off my nails and skinning my fingers in blood. With a loud hiss, I pulled myself up and picked up my priceless burden again, standing still without a single movement. Soft footsteps were heard from around the corner. Slipping into the shadow of the column supporting the vault of the dungeon, I pressed my back against the cold stone, hugging the wet nine-tailed tightly. "Be patient, girl, be patient, I'll get us out of here, no matter what it costs me," I thought, holding my breath so as not to attract the enemy's attention with my loud snuffling. The stranger slowly stomped to the door on the collapsed staircase, and I realized that this was my only chance. Looking out from around the corner and seeing the back of a puzzled long-haired brunette, I barely crept to the first steps of the last staircase leading to the exit from the dungeon. Walking up, twisting my neck, I kept an eye on the enemy until he disappeared behind a stone canopy. There was nothing left before the exit. The bright sunlight at the end of the tunnel blinded me, lulling my vigilance. Therefore, when I rushed out of the dungeon and almost crashed into the nine-tailed one standing as if nothing had happened, I tripped over my own foot and rolled head over heels across the clearing. "Naruto-kun, you passed the test," Kitsune exclaimed, giving me a big smile. "Stop it!" Wonderfully, unhurried clapping sounded from the dungeon behind him, and a pale-faced man emerged from the darkness, followed by a bespectacled man who had been dead quite recently. "Emma," I squeezed out of myself, after which I plopped down on my ass surrounded by a couple of my worst enemies and my best friend, staring senselessly into the void. Placing the body of the one I considered my beloved on my lap, I began to slowly stroke the scarlet hair, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. The features of the fake Kurama's face blurred, and thin trickles of water flowed from her mouth and ears, giving her a water clone. Raising an angry look at the grinning original, and then looking at the grinning pale-faced and bespectacled man, I threw the clone aside. "Now tell me what the hell is going on here." The explanation turned out to be wild to the point of impossibility. The pale-faced type with purple bags under his eyes is none other than Orochimaru, Snake Sannin and Konoha's main nuke Nin after Itachi. The bespectacled man is his student Kabuto, a gifted medic, but a completely useless fighter. This dungeon is one of the many laboratories of Orochimaru, who changes his place of residence with enviable regularity. Returning here in order to prepare for the attack on Konoha, he found a couple of wonderful homeless people in the laboratory. Out of curiosity, he did not immediately kill us, which he was incredibly glad about. After talking face-to-face with the Nine Tails, Sannin realized that we were pursuing a common goal, and if he did not doubt the usefulness of the Kyuubi deprived of chakra as a source of unique ancient knowledge, then he decided to test me for suitability as a student. First of all, the ability to act in non-standard situations was evaluated. You can even teach powerful jutsu to a monkey, but here's the savvy: it either exists or it does not. I exceeded his expectations, escaping from captivity in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. True, in many ways it was the merit of Kabuto, whose hands only hold a scalpel, but the fact remains that I was thinking well for my age, and the stories of the Nine Tail about my high learning ability and extraordinary motivation in destroying Konoha only fueled the interest of the Snake Sannin. Well, Naruto, do you want to become my student? Nuke Nin asked in an insinuating voice after a 20-minute educational program. Of course, Orochimaru-sama. I answered, grinning fervently, with such a mentor, it will not be difficult for me to surpass my father. From tomorrow we will start training, and now the Nine-Tailed One will heal you. The Snake Sannin turned around 180 degrees and headed to the dungeon with the bespectacled man. The Nine-Tailed One, who had been squirming on the sidelines all this time, smiled broadly and came up to me. Thank you for not leaving me, Naruto-kun. For me, this test was more indicative than 1,000 declarations of love, Bijou said quietly. I felt a quiet anger filling me, flowing smoothly into rage. Do you have any idea what it was like for me? I hissed through tightly clenched teeth. The fox stopped in mid-sentence, froze with his hand outstretched to me. I thought you were dead. I growled, pushing Kyuubi away from me. The demoness grinned viciously and grabbed me by the breasts. Your life depended on the results of this test, you white-haired fool. Bijou exclaimed, shaking me like a rag doll. I couldn't let you die because of your mediocre acting talents. Nine Tails barked, unclenching her fists and leaving my mortal body alone. After being silent for a few seconds and digesting the information I received, I recognized the rightness of the demoness. I'm sorry, I was wrong, I said quietly. Kitsune just snorted disgustedly. I can't believe I got under you, you hysterical brainless, the fox contemptuously spat on the ground. But, I tried to object, blushing deeply. It's better to be silent, don't disappoint me completely, Kitsune muttered, grabbing my wrist and giving me a tiny portion of scarlet chakra in her palm, healing the wound from the shackles. An hour later, when the last scratch was finished, Kyuubi slapped me on the shoulder. Well, that's it, there won't even be any scars left, Kitsune exclaimed fervently. I studied my wrists carefully and nodded gratefully. Kyuubi frowned disapprovingly. There is no need to take everything literally, from a simple, thank you, I will not be disappointed in you, Kitsune smiled slightly. Instead of answering, I squeezed the fox in the tightest hug I could. NNN, Bijou squeaked, trying to push me away from her with all her limbs. I'm so glad you're okay, I whispered softly. Hearing my words, Kitsune quieted down, and then responded to my embrace. Likewise, baby, the fox cooed, bursting into a low rumble. I stood on the threshold of our bamboo house and watched with impotent anger as Kabuto stuffed a bag with Uzumaki clan artifacts. After discovering our makeshift home, Orochimaru ordered his student to dig through it from top to bottom, and he easily found all our stashes. The damn snake was standing next to me, cooling our hot heads with his predatory grin. But there was nothing to do. In the end, this freak could finish us off on the spot and take everything without further ado. Orochimaru-sama, should I take this too? Bespectacled man asked, pulling out a pair of blades from a hollow bamboo stalk in the corner. I was shaking with rage, and only the hand of the nine-tails on my shoulder kept me from rash actions. Give it to me, the snake hissed, taking one of the blades and meticulously examining the pattern on the blade. Orochimaru, without warning, slashed with his sword at the end of the entrance door half a meter from my head, but he only broke through the wall of the bamboo stalk with a dull crunch. Ignoring the hissing of the angry fox, barely holding me in place, Sannin pulled the blade out of the wood and thoughtfully shook it in his palm. After a few seconds, he looked at me, and then threw the sword on the bed. No, only Uzumaki can use these blades, Orochimaru hissed. Kabuto shrugged his shoulders and, grabbing the bag more comfortably, left the house. Are there any objections? Snake asked. No, I said grimly. Well, that's nice. Orochimaru grinned crookedly, glanced at the nine-tailed woman with angrily flashing eyes and left. Damn, we've been robbed to the skin. I blurted out, slamming my fist into the wall, scraping my knuckles until they bled. It was predictable, the fox replied, grabbing my hand when I tried to vent my anger on the bamboo stalks for the second time. Now you need a teacher more than your clan trinkets, and then we will kill him and take everything he has, said the fox, grinning predatory. Oh, you bloodthirsty devil. When you get your strength back, will you send me to the next world too? I asked sarcastically. Well, you're a fool, Naruto. The nine-tailed one gave me a ringing slap on the back of the head. Ah. It hurts. I protested, rubbing my bruised head. Next time you'll think before you talk nonsense, the fox replied, lifting her nose with an independent air. I just laughed and, picking up the demoness in my arms, spun her around the room. For me, her slap on the head was more indicative than 1,000 words. Carefully lowering the fox, which was desperately bulging its eyes, onto the bed, I locked the door, after which the nine-tails and I began to relieve nervous tension in the most effective way in nature. The next day, Orochimaru was very out of sorts. It turned out that he returned here only to check out those very white-skinned humanoids in glass capsules. But the result of the test did not suit him. All the test subjects died. Pack your things, we're leaving in an hour, Kabuto said from the doorway. Where are we going? And why? I asked, suppressing a yawn with difficulty. The bespectacled man pulled me out of bed before dark. In Odagakura. There is nothing more useful for Orochimaru-sama here, the blonde man replied. I've never heard of such a village, muttered Kurama, wrapping herself in a blanket, looking at the uninvited guest with annoyance. Me too, I said honestly. Orochimaru-sama founded it less than 10 years ago, no wonder you haven't heard of it, Kabuto exhaled wearily, adjusting his glasses. I thought about it, but only for a second. The new village is an excellent springboard for preparing an attack on Konoha. I had no doubt that Kyuubi and I would not be able to cope on our own with all our desire in 100 years, because in addition to my sister and dad, several hundred shinobi live there, so it was necessary to get allies to deal with the extras. Okay, we'll be ready on time, I replied. Kabuto silently nodded and left. Kitsune sighed heavily and slowly slid off the bed. I don't even know who I want to gut more, this bespectacled jerk or his teacher, Nine-tailed grumbled, pulling on her tunic. I nodded in agreement and began to pile up our few luggage. Half a minute later, Kurama joined me. Swords in a bamboo case, a dozen kunai, an armful of scrolls with fire dragons, some of which I distributed in secret pockets on my belt, a couple of bedding, spare tunics and rawhide moccasins, and a couple of kilos of dried meat. That's all we have left after yesterday's unceremonious robbery. After putting things in a satchel, revived by the golden hands of the nine-tailed almost out of nothing, we went outside and ran into Orochimaru and Kabuto nose to nose. Both were light. Where are your things? I exclaimed in surprise. Orochimaru-sama deciphered one of the scrolls and sealed them with the help of Fuinjutsu, Kabuto answered with a reverent glance at the snake Sannin. I grimaced in disgust. Sometimes it seemed to me that if the bespectacled man had his way, he would have prayed for his precious sensei. Can you seal our backpack? 9, Tails asked. Of course. Give it to me. Orochimaru took out a small scroll from the pouch on his belt and stretched out his hand forward, waiting for the luggage. Kitsune helped me take off my backpack and handed it to Snake Sannin. Putting the satchel on the ground, Orochimaru put an empty scroll on it and folded a chain of 8 seals. Fuinjutsu, Kodo Hoin. Sannin hissed, placing his right palm on the scroll. With a soft pop, the backpack disappeared in a puff of white smoke, and a bizarre pattern of hieroglyphs appeared on the scroll. To print, as well as combat sea scrolls, by feeding the chakra to the printing center. At the first halt, I will teach you this technique, and now we will not waste time, Sannin instructed us, after which he handed the scroll to me. I nodded silently, glad that my burden was relieved by a good 10 kilos, adjusted the bamboo stalk with swords on my back and moved after Orochimaru. So began our short journey to Odogakure. As expected, there were no accidents on the road. All the Nukanins felt the power of Sannin for a good kilometer and preferred to get out of his way ahead of time, and simple bandits were not found in such a wilderness. The so-called halt was only late at night, but I didn't complain, even though we were jumping through the branches of trees with huge expenses of chakra, but after training with the 9 tails, I was not afraid of anything. The jutsu of sealing the object turned out to be much easier than a similar technique for preserving martial ninjutsu, but, nevertheless, it was her Uzumaki, for unknown reasons, decided to encrypt. After just an hour of training, I was able to reseal our satchel into a scroll. Not bad, very good, the snake praised me and went to the fire lit by Kabuto under the spreading crown of a tree. After opening the luggage, I took out dried meat, cut into narrow strips, and handed a couple of pieces to the demoness. While we were eating, Sannin kept glancing at us, after which he whispered about something with his student on the other side of the fire, ruining the little pleasure that we could still afford. Untying the bedding from the satchel, I handed one of them to the 9-tailed. After half a minute, we organized ourselves some kind of sleeping place a couple of meters from the fire. It was getting chilly at night, so we decided to sleep together to keep warm, and use the second litter as a blanket. Kabuto and Orochimaru lay down in comfortable sleeping bags. Kyubi hugged me to her and put her head on my shoulder. Despite all the difficulties of the last few days, I broke into a wide smile, and after a few seconds I fell asleep, unable to resist the charming warmth emanating from the fiery demoness. The journey to Odogakure, in total, took 8 days, and all the following days there were no halts at all. We stopped only in the dead of night, slept for 4 hours and continued on our way. Orochimaru didn't seem to be tired at all, but by the time he arrived, Kabuto looked like an animated corpse. Late in the evening of the 8th day, we finally reached our goal. The village was quite tiny, compared to Konoha, but, nevertheless, it was surrounded by a 10-meter wall of ground compacted with chakra. There were very extensive stepped rice fields under the wall, in which about 50 peasants were hunched knee-deep in water. A couple of sentries stood at the gate, lazily leaning on the jambs and talking listlessly about something. When they saw Orochimaru, they immediately pulled themselves to attention and made impenetrable faces. Welcome back, Orochimaru-sama. The left gatekeeper greeted his master. Snake Sannin ignored him and walked through the gate. We followed him, feeling a dozen curious glances of passers-by scurrying past. After a couple of minutes of leisurely walking, we reached the central square of the village, with a diameter of about 50 meters. 6 wide streets radiated from it, along which about 100 one-story and 2-story residential buildings were located. Although houses, this is a strong word, are more like huts. On the square itself there were a couple of large shops and taverns, to which people flocked every evening. The village was located on the slope of a hill, so the not too large 3-story mansion located higher up the slope seemed like a real palace against the background of other dwellings. Orochimaru led us into it. The door was opened by the butler, who bowed decorously to his master and stepped aside. Kabuto immediately trudged to the second floor, barely moving his legs. The snake's dwelling was furnished modestly, but with taste. Stone walls up to the height of a man were upholstered in soft burgundy cherry wood, oak parquet lay on the floor, and the staircase to the second floor boasted a carved balustrade. On the ground floor there is a guest room with a couple of armchairs and a secretary's desk. It seems that Sannin's dwelling concurrently served as the residence of the self-styled Kage. "Hello, Orochimaru-sama." A pretty dark-haired girl exclaimed when she saw the snake on the threshold, immediately jumping up from her seat and bowing low. I winced in disgust. How could you intimidate your subordinates like that? They will only think about how to stab you in the back. However, Kurama seemed to like this behavior of others. Kitsune, what to take from her? Well, now I will give you the documents of the citizens of Odogakure. With them, no one will touch you on the territory of the village, explained the snake, leading us to the secretary's desk. She heard everything perfectly, and already took out of the drawer a couple of crusts of thick cardboard covered with the thinnest leather. Please tell me your name and date of birth, the girl asked, looking at me. I thought for a second, and then called the fake data. Ojimichi Muro. Born on the 7th of August, 1980, the secretary scribbled on paper at the speed of sound, and after a few seconds beckoned me with her finger. Peel off the film and put your finger on this plate. She will forever remember the chakra of the first person who touched her, and will serve as your identity card. The girl handed me the crusts, and I followed her instructions. The silvery metal plate flashed with a bluish shimmer and went out. Congratulations, you are now a citizen of Odogakure. The secretary smiled sweetly, but when she saw the dead, emotionless face of Odokage behind my back, she immediately faded away and began to serve Kyubi. Tokugawa Yuki. Born on the 9th of September, 1980, after 10 seconds, the secretary handed Kurama her ID. She looked thoughtfully at the plate, then at Orochimaru, but when he barely nodded, she boldly poked her finger at the metal glitter. The plate flashed with a scarlet flash of light, but nothing else unusual happened. Miracles Snow. The snake grinned contentedly, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a pair of sky blue rings and put them on the table. These rings will show others that you are one of my confidants. With them, you cannot deny yourself anything on the territory of Odogakure. The village will pay for all your races. I'll be busy all day tomorrow, but I'll be waiting for you at this place at 5 in the morning the next day. You can be free, Orochimaru hissed, then turned his back on us and followed Kabuto to the second floor. Kurama and I immediately put a useful new thing on our fingers and studied it closely in the light of the sunset rays penetrating the room through the wide windows. It looks like aquamarine, Kitsune said thoughtfully. I could only keep silent. I'm a complete zero in geology. Can you tell me where I can spend the night here? 9. Tails asked the secretary. In the taverns on the central square, rooms are rented out. There is nowhere else. Odogakure rarely receives guests, the girl replied, still looking at us intently. Kitsune nodded silently and took my hand, persistently dragging me towards the exit. But I want to see the house. I was indignant. You'll see later. Kitsune cut me off roughly and pushed me out the door. The butler, all the while pretending to be a hanger, slid the bolt, and we were back on the street. And where are you in such a hurry? I asked sarcastically. Drink, eat and lemon, the nine-tailed answered briefly and clearly. The words stuck in my throat. I wanted all this, too, only under the impression of Sannin's home I managed to forget about it. So what are we waiting for? I asked, walking briskly towards the center of the village. The fox grinned and followed me. When we got to the square, we chose a tavern at random and marveled at how many people there were even in such a small village, if you gather it in one place. Shivering under the gaze of 50 eyes, we went to the innkeeper. Hey, doll, a big guy, under 2 meters tall, blocked our way. The tart smell of fumes hit my nose. I immediately tensed my whole body, preparing for a fight. Don't you want to have an interesting time with a real man? The views of others immediately began to study our personalities. Everyone was looking forward to what would happen next. Such impudence took my breath away. How can this bag of shit even think about touching my fox? Before Kurama had time to do anything, I filled my body with chakra and hit the bully twice, in the stomach and solar plexus, feeling how the fist splits the opponent's sternum. He bent in half, spewing the contents of his stomach onto the floor, which I took advantage of by kicking the freak with a U-turn in the jump. The drunkard flew to the side for several meters and collapsed in a shapeless heap near the stairs to the second floor, putting his head on the railing. There was a deathly silence in the tavern for a few seconds, but as soon as I looked around, everyone present defiantly returned to their business. It looks like it's not the first time they've seen a frail-looking young shinobi do a closet under 2 meters tall. However, this is not surprising, given their place of residence. What an aggressive male I have. The nine-tailed one grinned fervently and threw herself on my neck. I immediately hugged her tightly and gently stroked her red hair. Resting my head on Kitsune's shoulder, I broke into a wide smile, sincerely glad that I had the opportunity to show myself. But then I noticed a puddle of dark blood spreading out from under the head of the defeated bully. The mood immediately became worse than ever. Reluctantly breaking the warm embrace, I ignored the indignantly blinking Bijou and approached the Bugai, accompanied by the wary gaze of the innkeeper, who was rubbing the already squeaky clean glass with a rag faster and faster. After checking my pulse, I turned cold with horror. The big guy was dead. I think I overdid it, I said quietly. Turning around, I looked at the demoness flapping her eyes in bewilderment. Kurama. I killed a man, I said in a whisper. Kitsune frowned angrily, came up to me and pulled me up by the collar, staring intently into my eyes. So what? Is the life of this scum more precious to you than my honor? Kitsune asked defiantly. No, but it was possible to solve the case peacefully, or at least not to bring it to sin, I answered quietly, looking with regret at the still warm corpse. You're hopeless. Kitsune howled, pushing me aside and heading for the bar. Rubbing my bruised shoulder, I followed her in a bad mood. Something told me that our conversation wasn't over yet. What do you want? The plump innkeeper kindly asked, looking at the fresh corpse near his stairs, then at me, then at the chest of the nine-tailed. A room with one bed for the night, Bijou barked defiantly. I'm sorry, but all the rooms are occupied. The man spread his hands guiltily. Apparently, the massacre that happened just a couple of minutes ago did not impress him. Maybe there was a guard lurking somewhere among the visitors, or he was a shinobi himself, or he was completely confident in his snake roof. However, we had an ace up our sleeve. The fox silently put her hand on the counter, and the innkeeper, seeing the ring, immediately changed his face. I think I might have a room for you after all. Here you go. The first door on the left along the corridor on the second floor, the innkeeper handed Bijou a weighty iron key. Wonderful. Kitsune replied and immediately rushed upstairs, grabbing my wrist. Stepping over the cooling body of a drunkard, I didn't even have time to feel like the last bastard, as I found myself on the threshold of our anti-luxury room. Kurama fumbled with the lock for a few seconds, and then almost kicked me inside, slamming and bolting the door behind my back. Turning around and seeing Kitsune's fiercely sparkling eyes, I swallowed convulsively. It looks like it will hurt. Spineless mattress. The demoness barked. Kurama, I killed a human being. it was possible to solve the case with a mere, "This is Gria," howling in a squeaky voice. Kitsune mockingly tapped her fingers, folding her brush into a kind of duck beak, and then abruptly took a step forward and grabbed me by the breasts. "If you do that again, boy, I'll kill you myself." Bijou hissed, touching her foreheads with me. "And how will you do it?" I asked with a malicious grin. Kitsune's lips stretched out in an evil grin, and then a blow of such force followed that I flew against the wall, smashing a dilapidated bedside table with my back. "Are you completely off the rails, you tailed bitch?" I howled, sliding down from a pile of sharp debris, rubbing my ass covered with multiple bruises. "Ding-yang?" Kitsune hissed and knocked me down with a powerful throw. We grappled in a fiercely kicking, pushing and biting tangle and rolled on the floor until I was pinned to the floor by a kitsune sitting on my stomach. The fox raised his fist over my head. I closed my eyes in resignation and jerked my whole body when I heard a loud crunch of breaking wood. There was no pain. Then I opened first one eye, then the other, and stared in disbelief at the demoness hanging over me, punching the floor with her fist. The fox bared its tightly clenched jaws and breathed deeply, resounding the room with a loud hiss. Her nostrils were suspiciously inflated, as if she smelled some incredibly pleasant smell. "How can you not understand, you blonde fool? You are my first man," Kitsune barked, pulling her hand out of the pierced wood. I just couldn't believe my ears. "What, in 1,000 years? And not once? Do you have any idea what it feels like for me to realize that I lay down under a limp rag that whines like a little child every time it does what every man is obliged to do?" QB grabbed me by the breasts again and slowed me down like a sack of potatoes. "The ability to appreciate the lives of others is not a weakness," I answered with difficulty, pronouncing the words. "What are you doing there, rag?" Kitsune abruptly got to her feet and threw me on the bed. "The ability to appreciate life is not a weakness, and only cowards and psychopaths kill people right and left," I repeated once again, taking a sitting position. "Have you decided to teach me life, shch puppy?" The demoness' face was distorted by an evil grin, and her scarlet eyes glowed like a pair of red, hot coals. "I can't believe I fell in love with such scum," I replied quietly. Kitsune stopped in mid-sentence, and then tried to punch me in the face again. This time I didn't put up with it and joined the fight in full force. From countless training sessions with Kitsune, I knew that if she let go, she would beat to death. Abruptly throwing my foot forward, I delivered a powerful blow to the chest of the Nine-Tails, throwing her a few steps away. Jumping off the bed, I threw a pillow into the face of the demoness, who jumped to her feet, and in the moments it took Kitsune to throw the improvised projectile aside, I was 2 steps away from her. Ducking under a fist flying into my face, I rested my shoulder on the demoness' hips and with a swift jerk forward knocked her off her feet, throwing Kitsune over me. QB grabbed me by the collar in flight and dragged me to the floor with her. The fall on the boards could have been very painful if it had not ended with landing on the Kitsune, who did not have time to escape. She did not lose her head and squeezed my neck in a powerful grip. I tried to get out of it, but it was not there. My eyes almost fell out of their sockets from the monstrous pressure. Then I did the only thing I could do. I started hitting the fox in the stomach with my elbow. She announced the room with an angry hiss, but she did not give in. She really knew how to tolerate pain. Unable to break through the clamped vessels, the blood pulsed impotently under the demoness' grip. The mouth opened in a soundless scream. Every second I moved slower and slower, until I was completely silent, unable to move my arm. My vision went dark, my consciousness was fading. Is it really going to end this way, and I'm going to die at the hands of the monster I thought was my soulmate? Thank the gods, after a couple of moments, the nine-tailed one freed my neck and limply went limp. Coughing loudly, I gasped for air, crawling away from the raging Kitsune. Huddled in a corner of the room, I looked apprehensively at the panting demoness, staring senselessly at the ceiling. After blinking a few times, Kitsune slowly got to her feet and pushed back her hair that had fallen on her face. The fox looked at me and pursed her lips. I'm sorry, I went a little too far, the nine-tailed one said softly, shyly looking away. Forgive? I was speechless from shock. Yes, how can you forgive for this at all? I exclaimed, jumping to my feet. You almost strangled me. I pointed an accusatory finger at Biju. I don't know what came over me. The fox faded and looked at the floor. You made me angry, very angry, but I just wanted to teach you a lesson. I had no intention of killing you. The demoness exclaimed, taking a step towards me. Go to hell with your lessons, mad. I barked, pushing Kitsune away from me and heading for the exit. Wait, where are you going? The fox asked, watching me fiddle with the lock. Rent another room. I'm not going to sleep in the same bed with you anymore, I muttered darkly, slamming the door loudly. Going down the stairs and almost tripping over the corpse of a bully, who never moved, I went to the bar. Do you have another number? I asked. What's wrong with you with the female, male? The man answered the question with a question, grinning maliciously. I was shaking with rage. This time I didn't feel the slightest remorse when I slammed a fist with a ring on my finger into the innkeeper's forehead. The man fell off the high chair on which he was sitting, and nobly put his head against the wall. I was already worried that I now had two corpses on my conscience, but then the innkeeper turned over on his stomach with a heavy groan and rested his trembling hands on the floor. The key! Quickly! I growled in a voice not my own. The man frantically fumbled in his left pocket, cautiously squinting his eyes in my direction. Just a few seconds later, he slapped the key on the counter. Here. The room opposite. The innkeeper quickly rattled, rubbing his forehead bruised in blood. Thank you very much, I spat out through my teeth, taking the key in my hand. Turning around, I recoiled and could not restrain a strong obscene expression. QB was grinning provocatively right behind my back. Here, you can do it whenever you want. The fox slapped me on the shoulder, but I immediately pushed her aside. Fuck off. I snapped uncompromisingly, heading for the stairs. Kitsune remained standing in front of the bar with her mouth open. It seems that by my behavior I destroyed her worldview. And that's right, there is nothing to create lawlessness. You see, he'll get a little smarter, or he'll kill me in my sleep. Yeah, and you can't call her off without mutual consent. The devil pulled me as a sign of gratitude after our first hookup to change the terms of the contract so that Kurama didn't feel like a prisoner. Closing the door with all the bolts, I took a tiny brush with an inkwell from my belt pocket and drew a simple detector seal on the cracked jamb, stuck a weakened explosive seal on top of it, designed to stun the uninvited guest and wake me up, and did the same trick with the window frame. Something told me that in addition to the offended nine tails, someone more terrible might come to me, and an extra seal on the guard would not hurt me. When I finished mining the room, I took off my shoes, flopped down on the bed and turned to the wall, intending to sleep right there without undressing. After a loud slam of the door, the nine-tail finally closed her mouth and frowned irritably. She understood what was the reason for the short-term clouding of her mind. The smell of blood awakened the predatory instincts of the demon, and only with a titanic effort of will did Kitsune keep herself in control, struggling with an irresistible thirst for murder and brutal hunger. Hey you, Kitsune looked at the innkeeper, who was cautiously peeking out from behind the bar. I'm listening. Realizing that they were addressing him, the man immediately pulled himself to attention. Clean up here and bring me half a liter of beer and 3 good steaks with blood. The fox significantly shook her head towards the body. What, straight out of it? The man asked incredulously. Are you a complete idiot? No, simple beef. Kitsune was indignant. This minute. The innkeeper answered, finally coming out from behind the bar and dragging the body to the door to the kitchen. The fox, meanwhile, sat down at the nearest vacant table and began to wait. Maybe I want too much from him. After all, he's still very young, and he's never been very cool. The main thing is that he really loves me, and I will always have time to re-educate him. Then his simplicity is even in my favor. In a few years I will be able to grow an ideal life partner for myself. But you still need to start with yourself, 1,000-year-old nine-tailed kitsune, and I lose my head from the smell of blood like 100-year-old one-tailed. The demoness snorted contemptuously and frowned discontentedly, angry at herself. Her gloomy thoughts were interrupted by the innkeeper, who quite noiselessly lowered a tray with 3 tender pieces of meat oozing with blood and a mug of beer on the table. "Bon appetit," said the man and pressed the tray to himself, giving the fox a respectful half-bow. The huge bump shining on the innkeeper's forehead made the demoness laugh so much that she completely forgot about the melancholy eating her a few seconds ago. Kh, get lost, ladle. Kitsune grinned provocatively and bit into the nearest piece of meat. The innkeeper made a barely noticeable grimace, but without the slightest delay flew away to the bar, staring with quiet malice at the red-haired boor stuffing her stomach. In his memory, Orochimaru's entourage had always behaved somewhat cheekily, but so far none of them had raised a hand against him. Well, everything happens for the first time sometime. Besides, in many ways it was his fault. It was not worth gloating, even if the interlocutor looks like a spineless brat. The red-haired woman, as if mocking, deliberately slowly finished with a plentiful dinner, now and then glancing at the owner of the establishment from under her brows. With a demonstrative belch, Kitsune retreated to her room. "Impudent dog," the innkeeper hissed, rattling dirty dishes. Now he began to understand why he and Blondie quarreled out of the blue. Climbing to the second floor, the nine-tailed snorted contemptuously, glancing at the locked door of Naruto's room. And what is this idiot trying to achieve by fanning a scandal out of such a trifle? In the end, I apologized. Without waiting for an answer at the door, the fox shook her head ruefully and went to bed. Wrapped tightly in a blanket, the demoness tossed and turned for a good half of the night, unable to fall asleep without a warm Jinchuriki by her side. She could not have imagined that she had gotten so used to him in the short 6 months that they were together. Kyubi's awakening was disgusting. The fox's unsuccessful attempts to feel the warm body of the Jinchurika next to him continued until the very morning, even in a dream. With a heavy groan, Kitsune got out of bed, yawned widely and sleepily rubbed her eyes. Looking around the shabby hotel room with a bleary look, the demoness remembered their yesterday's skirmish in all details. The fox snorted contemptuously and, hastily pulling on a battered tunic, went to storm the room of the overly touchy Uzumaki. Going out into the corridor, Kyubi stopped in front of the guy's door and began to hammer it insistently with her fist. "On are you that, from cry why?" Biju shouted at the whole hotel. The door opened almost immediately, and the disheveled innkeeper appeared on the threshold. The fox choked with surprise and fell silent with his fist raised in the air. "Your young man left last night. Anyway, at 4 in the morning he was no longer here," the man answered the demoness' mute question. Kitsune's jaw dropped in shock. She definitely did not foresee such a scenario. "Did he say where he went?" Kyubi asked in a hoarse voice. "I'm sorry, but no. Try asking Orochimaru-sama about it." The man nodded expressively towards the aquamarine ring on Biju's finger. "Well, of course I will ask." Nine-tailed barked and, abruptly pushing the innkeeper away from her, grabbed her backpack and went down the stairs. Offended once again, the man covered the impudent girl with such a host of curses that it was time to compile a dictionary of profanity of the country of rice fields, but he did not develop the conflict. His own skin was more expensive than the abstract concept of self-esteem. Moreover, no one saw his shame. "That's a little asshole, he didn't even leave me a note." The fox frowned sternly, which caused a few passers-by to unknowingly bypass her at a respectful distance. Who would have thought that one day I would regret the clause of the contract forbidding me to return to print on my own? Kitsune looked thoughtfully at the ever-approaching Orochimaru mansion. I hope this winter won't pretend to be a touchy for a long time. Until we have won the favor of this reptilian nit, we don't have time for bickering. Tormented by regrets about what he had done, Naruto could not fall asleep. Tired of tossing and turning, the guy threw the blanket on the floor and headed for the window. After dispelling the explosive seal, Jinchuriki carefully climbed out onto the ledge and climbed onto the roof of the hotel. Sitting down on a more or less level place, Naruto crossed his legs and looked around the village illuminated by the silvery moonlight with a tired look. The rough tiles pleasantly cooled the feet buzzing after a long walk, allowing the guy to focus on his difficult thoughts. I am a murderer, a lonely thought was spinning in his head. No, not a defender, not a warrior, not a shinobi, just a crazy jerk. He was drunk and didn't know what he was saying or doing. And I killed him, just to show off in front of Kurama. Then how am I better than my sister and crazy dad, since I kill right and left ordinary people who are not able to fight back, for no reason? Naruto looked down at his palms illuminated by the moonlight. In the silvery reflections, he saw dark spots of long-washed blood. Do I really want my parents' blood on my hands one day? Jinchuriki's face, distorted by deep shadows, became stony. Memory helpfully threw him memories of why he actually started all this. And yet, no matter how bastards they were, they didn't kill me, and they didn't let others do it. And I did. After that, what right do I have to be outraged by the injustice of fate, if I myself am worse than my tormentors? Jinchuriki lowered his head to his hands crossed on his knees and sighed heavily. It seems that I am completely confused. After half an hour of reflection, the guy roused himself and opened his eyes wide. Whose interests do I follow, my own, or the nine-tailed one, striving to regain its former power with my hands? What if all her warm feelings for me are just a game, and after achieving her goal, she will finish me off altogether? Remembering the nightmarish feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness in a dead fox grip, Naruto gently touched his neck with his fingertips and tucked his legs. Oh, someone, but she can, and will kill. The seemingly inextinguishable fire of trust, friendship and love between Jinchuriki and Bijou was rapidly losing its former strength. Wrapping his hands around his knees, Naruto discerned a paper crunch in the heart area, barely audible in the night chirping of cicadas. Shuddering slightly, the guy straightened up. Naruto slowly lowered his hand into his bosom and carefully extracted a slightly crumpled colorful piece of cardboard. Last word from his mother. Wiping away the tears that appeared in his eyes so inappropriately, Naruto, who had not reconciled himself to the loss, carefully smoothed the card and began to read the clumsy lines so dear to his heart for the umpteenth time. Be strong but fair. Don't be like your father and sister. Jinchurika's lips twitched. I've already become like Mom. Uzumaki bit his fist to keep from howling out loud. Gods, who did I just contact? Kubi, Orochimaru, and then who? The Mafia of the Land of Waves? Will I start cutting people right and left at the behest of the left heel? Yes, go to hell. Jinchuriki's gaze returned to the middle of the postcard and an obsession began to form in his head. Stubborn fool, it was necessary to immediately fulfill the last will of the mother, and go to the land of lightning. There is every chance to start a new life, find a new goal, or at least get the means to achieve the previous one at the state level. And for information about the location of Otogekure and Orochimaru's hideout, I will get a fair amount of trust from the Raikage. Yes, we will. After sitting like this for a good half of the night, the exhausted boy got to his feet with the first rays of the sun and went back to the hotel. He didn't want to stay at the crime scene anymore, next to the one who tried to kill him. Quickly pulling on a tunic that smelled of sweat, the guy put on a backpack and moved a couple of weighty bundles with family blades, making sure of the reliability of the fastening. Nodding with satisfaction, Naruto cleared the entrance and descended into the hall with a soundless step. With the exception of a couple of drunken drunks lying face down in a plate, the room was empty. The innkeeper was dozing in an embrace with a waitress at the bar. A daughter or a niece, or maybe a lover, the boy grinned to himself. Soundlessly dropping the key on the bar, Naruto disappeared into the twilight, pierced by the first reflections of the scarlet disk of the sun. Having lost his first mentor and his former life guidelines, he sought to find new ones as soon as possible. Having reached the mansion of the snake Sannin, Kitsune had already managed to prepare another impressive tirade against her unlucky carrier. Confidently knocking on the door, the fox crossed her arms over her chest and began to wait for an answer. A quarter of a minute later there was a metallic clang of a bolt being pulled back and a smart footman appeared on the threshold. The man's emotionless face was distorted by a fake smile when his gaze fell on the pale blue ring on Kitsune's neat finger. "Greetings, Yuki-sama." The footman opened the door wide and stepped aside, inviting Kitsune to go into the house. Hearing such an appeal, the nine-tailed woman fell into a stupor for a second before she remembered yesterday's registration procedure, during which she and Naruto called themselves fake names for the sake of conspiracy. Nodding silently, the fox entered the hall, noting along the way that she likes it insanely when the servants walk around her on their hind legs. The footman immediately slammed the door behind her and answered the silent question of the guest. "Orochimaru-sama is not here now, and he will appear only late in the evening. Would you like to go to the recreation room, or maybe to the bath?" The footman could hardly restrain a disgusted grimace. The smell from the cute girl was more suitable for longshoremen. "I wish, but it can wait a little." "You haven't seen my companion here, what's his name?" Kitsune tapped her temple with her finger, trying to remember the fake name Naruto that she missed. "Ojimichi Muro?" suggested the footman, inwardly mocking the forgetfulness of the sweaty savage. "Yes, exactly." The fox snapped her fingers and grinned approvingly, looking at the interlocutor. "I'm sorry, but he didn't show up here today." The man spread his hands guiltily. The fox frowned in puzzlement. "And where did this crybaby go?" "And to hell with him, he's not going anywhere from Otogakure. Although he is slow-witted, he is not an idiot at all to miss such a good opportunity to become a student of Sannin. Surely she's having fun somewhere without me right now, so what am I worse for?" Believing in her own assumptions, Kitsune snorted contemptuously and looked up at the patiently waiting footman. "Take me to the bath and bring me some clean clothes," the demoness ordered in an imperious tone. The footman nodded silently and led the guest into the cellars of a small but luxurious mansion. Naruto, meanwhile, went around all the grocery stores and stuffed his satchel full of various snacks for free. Thoroughly prepared for another long march, Jinchuriki passed through the gates of the village unhindered. The blue ring glittering in the sun at first glance removed all questions from the guards. After going into the forest for a good mile, Naruto stopped in the shade of a spreading tree and turned back for the last time. "Goodbye, Kurama-chan. I'm sure you'll get along with Orochimaru, and he won't disappoint you." Grinning bitterly, Uzumaki folded a chain of seals and exclaimed, "Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu." Countless training sessions at the limit of their own capabilities were not in vain. The dense forest was announced by the trill of countless claps of incipient copies of the blonde Jinchuriki. When the smoke cleared, there were almost 300 clones standing on the ground, trunks and branches of the village. Without waiting for the command, the crowd of blondes scattered, and the devil himself would not have figured out which one of them was real. Orochimaru and his faithful companion Kabuto are comfortably located in a forest thicket, 100 kilometers from their village. Returning from a short foray into a secret laboratory, the snake Sannin wanted to postpone at least for a while the fuss with a pile of course, important, but insanely tedious and monotonous papers that was coming to him, as the head of Otogakure. At first, the idea of erecting his own hidden village seemed very attractive to the hermit, a safe haven, loyal people, an opportunity to occasionally amuse his ego, but in fact everything was far from rosy. The settlement, which has grown to almost 1,000 people, has become an endless source of problems and headaches for the ambitious scientist, which is why he increasingly thought about taking away all valuables and equipment and never appearing in it again. But while the legendary patience of the snake Sannin kept him from rash actions, and in light of the recent replenishment of his personal guard with a couple of the most entertaining individuals, he felt the long-forgotten excitement of the experimenter. Jinchuriki, an almost pure, blooded Uzumaki, in love with his own bijou, determined to destroy the village of the Hidden Leaf, but can you believe that he got into his hands only thanks to a lucky coincidence? No other way than fate itself sent him the perfect tool to achieve any conceivable and unthinkable goals. Orochimaru-sama, tea is ready. Kabuto's soft voice interrupted the flight of the hermit's thoughts, returning him to the real world. Measuring the student with a prickly look, Sannin immediately became kinder when he saw a bowl of fragrant herbal tea in front of him. I checked the prescription of your medicine, and found a mistake in it, as if by chance, Kabuto said, adjusting his glasses. Orochimaru almost doused himself with tea and stared intently at the student. Which one? Sannin asked. Here. According to my calculations, the dose can be reduced by half if you replace one ingredient and increase the cooking time to 8 hours. Kabuto handed the teacher 4 notebook sheets covered with small clumsy hieroglyphs and a good dozen bulky chemical formulas. The bespectacled man with carefully concealed pride watched Orochimaru's face stretching as he read the document. Great job, Kabuto. As a reward, you will receive the 107th sample you asked for. Sannin smiled faintly, handing the sheets back, and armed himself with a bowl again. The bespectacled man made a slight bow to the teacher as a sign of appreciation and leaned back on the trunk of a nearby tree. He had a deep respect for his sensei and his scientific works, and was happy to follow any of his instructions. Now, the life and health of the snake Sannin directly depended on Kabuto's actions. Powerful and indestructible, at first glance, the shinobi was struck by a serious illness. His body was rotting alive, and only a complex multi-component decoction supported him in the ranks, drowning out the anguished hissing of damaged lungs. Kabuto didn't understand why his sensei wouldn't use the soul transmigration technique in any way. Waiting for the perfect candidate? So after all, in his position, you cannot wait. Orochimaru noticed the anxious look of the student on himself. Is something wrong, Kabuto? The hermit asked. I'm worried about you, teacher. Your condition is getting worse every day, and the medicine will only delay the inevitable. The bespectacled man replied in a hollow voice. Enough for a couple of years, the rest is none of your business, the hermit replied dryly. As you say. Kabuto adjusted his glasses and took out a small leather bag with many pockets in which scalpels of various shapes and sizes glittered. After looking closely at his wealth, Yakushi, according to criteria known to him alone, selected one of the medical instruments and began to polish it with a velvety cloth. Watching the student with a slight grin, Orochimaru changed his face after a few seconds and began to sniff carefully. Kabuto put away the cloth and gripped the scalpel tightly in his hand. He knew that the teacher's sharpened snake sense of smell allows him to smell the enemy long before he shows his face. I can smell Jinchuriki from all sides, said the snake, puzzled, getting to his feet. Did he really run away? Kabuto was surprised, jumping up from the ground. Obviously so, Orochimaru replied, jumping onto a tree branch and gazing intently into the wilderness of the forest. The snake could not understand why he was unable to identify the source of the smell. The answer did not take long to wait. Several identical-looking blondes with heavy backpacks on their backs flashed through the foliage. That bastard, he even faked the smell. Orochimaru exclaimed. He could not even think that the basic, in fact, technique could be brought to such a level. Taking note that it was necessary to pay more attention to the shadow cloning jutsu upon his return, Snake Sannin took out a small bottle with thick glass walls sealed with a wax-soaked cork from a secret pocket of his kimono. A flowing purple liquid splashed inside. The serpent made sure of the integrity of the vessel and squeezed it tightly in the palm of his hand. A student of Snake Sannin jumped on a branch next to the teacher, and rushed to chase the last fugitive, but Orochimaru stopped the belligerent boy by putting his hand on his shoulder. Better put on a filter mask. Who knows how many of his clones are now sneaking around in the woods. Sannin deftly intercepted the vial so that with one movement of his thumb he knocked out the cork. Do you want to stop him with nerve gas? Yakushi guessed, snatching a respirator from his backpack and fastening the straps on the back of his head. The Snake Sannin himself did without chemical protection. His body was immune to any known poisons, especially his own preparation. Exactly, Orochimaru smiled wryly, folding a short chain of seals. Futon, Risenpu no Jutsu. Sannin barked, uncorking the vial. A powerful gust of wind instantly evaporated the purple liquid and with incredible speed carried a cloud of poisonous gas after the clones hiding in the foliage. We can only hope that the boy was stupid enough, and his original was present in the group of clones, Sannin thought gloomily. 10 minutes later, Orochimaru, along with his ward, went to check the results of his clever attack. On an area of several square kilometers in the form of a wide cone, 24 unconscious bodies were found. Checking for originality was carried out not in an aesthetic, but in a reliable and practical way. Kabuto and Orochimaru, only when they saw another victim of poisonous gas, threw senbon at her. With each pop of the disappearing shadow clones, the Snake Sannin grew more and more gloomy, realizing that the original was not among them. Having finished the latter, Orochimaru exhaled noisily and measured the drooping Kabuto with an angry look. We were tricked like the last idiots. Surely now more than 100 fakes are running away in all directions from the village. Don't worry so much about some boy, Orochimaru-sama, the bespectacled man tried to calm Sensei. Some boy? This is a damn nine-tail carrier with outstanding potential as a shinobi. You yourself said that the nine-tail has lost all its chakra and is useless even as a test subject. And you still need to be able to realize the potential. The same Gyuren did not meet your expectations, Kabuto said. Sannin made a contemptuous face, but then waved his hand and turned his back on his student. You're right, they'll sink through the ground. Let's go, there's no point in lingering here any longer. Sannin, plunged into heavy thoughts about the vicissitudes of fate, moved to his native village. Kabuto did not lag behind his teacher by a single step, striving to show his usefulness and reliability even more against the background of a runaway Jinchuriki. Upon returning to Odogakure, Snake Sannin was expecting unexpected details of the recent incident. A couple of chunins were dozing at the gate, but as soon as Orochimaru got within 50 steps of them, they immediately blinked sleepily. Noticing the hermit, the fighters stood at attention, barely suppressing yawns. Welcome back, Orochimaru-sama. The gatekeeper greeted the gentleman, pulling a fake smile and straining with all his being, feeling the bad mood of the hermit. The self-proclaimed Otokage wanted to rip off 3 skins from a negligent subordinate, but realized in time that he had not given the city guard an order to keep an eye on the newcomers in the circle of his entourage. With a disgusted grimace, Sannin walked through the gate and headed to his mansion. At least he still had the Uzumaki clan artifacts. The serpent was sure of the reliability of his secret vault like nothing else. The gatekeepers exhaled with relief and, waiting until Orochimaru disappeared from sight, began to discuss possible reasons for his discontent. The butler, who met Snake Sannin in his house, was puzzled by his bad mood and, very far-sighted, did not load him with information about the papers accumulated during his absence. Kabuto immediately fled to his room, intending not to show himself to the teacher until he himself called him. Having conducted the gentleman to his chambers, the butler invited him to go to the bath. After receiving a silent nod in response, the butler went downstairs to check the condition of the pool before the visit of the owner of the house. To his surprise, the dirty tunic of the red-haired girl and the white kimono prepared to replace her were still lying in the locker room. So, her mistress was still sitting in hot water. Almost 5 hours in a row, it should be noted. Frowning with disgust, the butler threw the tunic into the basket with dirty laundry and, throwing the kimono over his elbow, went to expel the late guest. "Yuki-sama, Orochimaru-sama has returned from a business trip and wants to swim," Kubi measured the butler with a lazy look. The steamed fox was not thinking clearly. But when the meaning of what was said reached her, she immediately jumped out of the water. Just at the moment and the snake Sannin came out of the locker room in only a loincloth. Orochimaru froze without a single movement and opened his eyes wide with a golden sheen, trying to understand whether the picture before his eyes was real, or whether he had overreacted, considering himself invulnerable to any chemicals. When the fox, hissing at the butler for sluggishness, hastily began to pull on the clothes helpfully served to her, Sannin's jaw almost dropped. "He definitely has something to talk about with the nine-tail. What are you doing here?" Orochimaru asked, squinting suspiciously. "And you can't see it from me right away?" "I'm washing." The fox answered with a challenge, hastily arranging her voluminous breasts in a tight kimono, clearly not designed for curvy women. The snake Sannin's brief confusion was replaced by serious anger. The snake has never tolerated frivolous attitude towards himself, and even more so was not going to start doing it at the 50th year of life. The man stepped forward and fixed his dead gaze on the brazenly glittering scarlet eyes of the demoness. "What the devil are you steaming your tailed ass in my bath when your Jinchuriki is rushing away from the village at full speed?" The snake hissed through tightly clenched teeth, following the slowly retreating demoness. The butler, meanwhile, realized that if he fell under the hot hand of the owner now, there would not even be bones left of him. The peasant sidled out of the bathhouse and was gone, leaving the hapless guest to be torn to pieces by an old snake. "What?" "Nine," Tails exclaimed in amazement, resting her back against the wall. There was such surprise and disbelief in the scarlet eyes that Orochimaru's anger was dulled, replaced by the former bitterness of the loss of a valuable test subject. With a heavy sigh, the snake Sannin retreated a step, stuck his elongated arm behind the locker room door and pulled his terrycloth robe off the hook, giving the stunned fox a couple of seconds to assimilate the information. "I came across 24 Naruto clones 100 kilometers from the village. Kabuto and I tried to stop them, but there was no original among them." Kitsune's eyes opened wide. It was a trademark trick of her Jinchuriki, leaving no doubt about the veracity of Orochimaru's words. Snake Sannin, meanwhile, put on a robe and busily belted himself. How is that?" Kitsune asked in a trembling voice, slowly lowering her gaze to the floor. She foresaw anything, but not Naruto's escape the very next day after their quarrel. "That's what I wanted to find out from you," Orochimaru snorted contemptuously. He had already realized that Kyubi didn't know anything, and it was pointless to be angry at her. "Did he leave me?" The fox's legs gave way, and the proud nine-tailed fell to her knees, looking into the void. She could not have imagined that such a trifle, an unfortunate oversight, a pathetic and worthless stupidity, could lead to such disastrous consequences. Orochimaru frowned in puzzlement. He thought that the fox was just using the gullible boy for his own purposes, as he planned to do himself, but it seems that there was something more between them. After waiting for half a minute for decency, Orochimaru only succeeded in making Kitsune's back shake with suppressed sobs. Is everything repeating itself again, and the sworn assurances of love and loyalty to the test turned out to be an empty sound? Was she being used once again, so subtly pretending that she almost believed in such a sweet and welcome lie? Orochimaru wanted to be outraged by the cheap game in public, but after a few seconds he realized that the tears were real. Figuring out how to productively use Kitsune's mental state to extract the information he needed, the snake Sannin sympathetically sank to the floor near the whimpering Ninetail. "Tell me what happened between you," Orochimaru asked in a calm voice, in which there was not a hint of the former angry hissing. And Kurama told everything without concealment. She saw no point in lying, because against the background of the betrayal of her second half, any consequences of a rash decision were an empty sound for the broken demoness. "We wanted to spend the night in a tavern, but we ran into a drunken bully. He started hitting on me. Naruto accidentally killed him. Instead of taking responsibility for his act with dignity, he began to be killed because of some drunk. He put the life of this animal above my honor." Kitsune's voice faltered. Even now, Jinchurika's behavior exasperated her. "I decided to teach him a lesson. At first, in words, I tried to convey to him that for shinobi to kill is not that the norm is a duty. But this idiot fanatically insisted that the ability to appreciate the lives of others is not a weakness, but I am scum and tailed trash." Kitsune smiled mirthlessly. Orochimaru listened with genuine interest, waiting for the culmination of the story. "I beat him and, losing my head from anger, almost strangled him." The fox, as if in a trance, looked at her hands, again feeling the throbbing warmth of the neck of the strangled Jinchuriki. Snake Sannin choked with surprise, "But where has it been seen that disputes with a child were resolved in this way?" "I tried to apologize, but Naruto wouldn't listen, locked himself in the room. And then he ran away without saying a word to me," the fox said softly, feeling tears coming to her eyes again. "What a fool you are after all." Exhaling heavily, Orochimaru muttered, propping his head with his fist and scalding Kyubi with a disappointed look. The fox flashed her wet eyes angrily from under her narrow eyebrows. The demoness immediately jumped to her feet and wiped her tears with her sleeve. She shouldn't have shown her weakness to nobody. Especially this viper. And he himself is a homegrown genius, a Sannin, but he failed to catch an untrained genin. Kitsune spat, collecting all the poison she had. Orochimaru winced in disgust, but ignored the insult. Now he did not take the nine-tailed seriously. It is not surprising that she has been turned around as they wanted for almost 1,000 years. She was even more of a child than her Jinchuriki. And children need a special approach. Then you can mold them into whatever your heart desires. Who better than Orochimaru to know this? Don't you understand that Naruto is still a child who has never killed or seen death? The enraged fox stumbled in mid-sentence and thought hard. He's only 12 years old, and the fact that you have already managed to drag him into bed will not make him a battle-hardened killer, Orochimaru said in a mentoring tone, slowly getting to his feet. "No one dragged him, he asked me to." Kyubi was indignant. "And you're glad to try, you lustful fool," Orochimaru snorted contemptuously. As a scientist and a hardened idealist, he could not stand people who were slaves of their bodies and their base desires. Kyubi wanted to object, but froze with her mouth slightly open, not finding what to say. The first murder is always not easy and is remembered for a lifetime. At least, this is what happens in mentally healthy people. I thought it was understandable, but you managed to distinguish yourself here too. Instead of supporting your Jinchuriki in a difficult moment, you almost killed him just because he's not a psychopath. Orochimaru was indignant. Kurama drooped and lowered her head dejectedly. It was impossible to dispute Sannin's words, because the demoness really knew nothing about human children and how to raise cold-blooded killers from them. If you had more patience and at least a drop of brains, the destruction of Konoha would only be a matter of time, and now there is every chance that our hapless avenger will fall into the clutches of Anbu and he will be dragged to his father on the carpet, and there, Orochimaru grinned unkindly. Mindful of the heartwarming story of Jinchuriki the Nine-Tailed, the snake rightly judged that execution was the best thing that could wait for Naruto at home. Kyubi felt uneasy. Not only did she let her protege down so much, she also put herself under attack. the seal still connected their lives together, and after Naruto's death, she would follow him to the Shinigami. At the same time, the current ridiculous reserve of strength did not inspire the fox with confidence that death would be followed by rebirth, and not oblivion. We're still bound by the seal, and I'm only here because of the draft agreement. Is it possible to use this connection and bring Jinchuriki back? Kitsune asked. The snake Sanin's face stretched out in surprise. He had never met anything like this in his practice and at first thought that the nine-tailed one had fooled its bearer and convinced him to completely remove the seal. Can I take a look at this contract? Asked Orochimaru. Kurama nodded silently, and a large scroll materialized on her palm with a soft pop, then another smaller one. This is an addition to the contract, we signed it quite recently, Kitsune explained, seeing the puzzled look of the snake hermit. Intrigued, raising an eyebrow, Sannin unfolded the paper and began eagerly to read the smooth lines of the contract, under which the most complex ligature of seals shone through. Interesting, curious, the snake muttered until he reached the appendix. After reading a short paragraph 3 times, Orochimaru looked at the nine-tailed one in amazement. How did you manage to convince him to give his consent so that he could not seal you without your desire? And although okay, it doesn't matter. The contract really doesn't give you complete freedom, and part of your soul is still in print. After the death of Jinchuriki, she will go to the pure world and pull you with her. Thank you for the lecture, but I knew all this without you, the nine-tail replied with ill-concealed irritation. Don't be impertinent, or I'll cut you into pieces and let you experiment, the snake Sannin threatened, looking very seriously into Kitsune's eyes. That, as expected, did not penetrate. I'll resurrect and swallow it alive, the nine-tailed one retorted, licking her lips carnivorously. Orochimaru winced in disgust, but decided to stop the senseless exchange of pleasantries. Kubi did not perceive threats, even if there were no serious reasons for that. In principle, purely theoretically, it is possible to create a reverse summoning jutsu based on the techniques of summoning animals. Snake Sannin looked up at the ceiling, lost in thought for a couple of moments. Kubi waited patiently, hoping for the best. But it will take time, which I don't have enough time without messing with your couple, snapped the snake uncompromisingly. Don't you care about your own safety? If Naruto is caught by the Konoha shinobi, then your location will become known to everyone, the nine-tailed reminded. The first sound thought from your mouth, Orochimaru patted his hands picturesquely, bringing the demoness to white heat. I hasten to upset you, it's already known to everyone, because who, if not Otogekure, is the largest supplier of rice for Konoha? Sannin smiled nastily. Good show, hissed the fox through tightly clenched teeth, what do you want from me? This is a completely different conversation, the snake Sannin's eyes flashed with greedy fire, not foreshadowing anything good for the nine-tailed. That's the end of it.